after 10 is the time. An extraordinary contribution to Nick's show a few moments ago from the former Labour MP Anne Keane, who would have been my MP actually if I lived then where I live now. But I don't know if I've got it in me to do that later in the programme. We'll find out, shall we? If you don't know, I myself am adopted, and so the question of what it was like for mothers to give up babies that they didn't really want to give up, even if they understood that circumstances demanded it, as opposed to authorities demanding it, which is the plight of the women and indeed the former children, if you like, to whom the government is being urged to apologise. I just may find it a little bit too close to home. But then again, I may not. Let's see how I feel at 11 o'clock, shall we? Or indeed at 12 o'clock. Because we begin with the... Well, I mean, how many times can you say the same things in a slightly different order? There's no point trying to work out why Donald Trump is doing what he's doing, because we will never know. It seems feasible, doesn't it, that the latest extension of the deadline, another 10 days now to the 6th of April for them to open the strait, is, I mean, maybe that's designed to bump the markets again. I think that was a compelling account, and looking at the timing, the 14-minute delay between enormous bets being placed by people who almost certainly had some prior knowledge of what the president was about to say, and then the president saying it, is almost impossible not to conclude that that was not a coincidence. So is he doing it again? Are people making huge sums of money again because of his latest extension of the deadline? And you know, I found it funny. Isn't it odd how the human brain works? I genuinely found it funny, even though we were talking about hideous things. I found the distillation of Trump's madness very, very funny. The simple list of facts that the war was over but not over. It had been won but hadn't been won. He needed help but didn't need help. I found it genuinely amusing, even though the territory was so grim. And I don't find it funny today. Why is that? Why does that pendulum swing? Is it depending on where you're sitting? Metaphorically speaking, is it about perspective? Is it the mood you're in when you wake up in the morning? I mean, it was funny, right? That list, I think it probably went viral, did it, as a clip, that account of the extraordinary somersaulting that Donald Trump has been embarked on in recent days, recent weeks. The fact that he will say something and then in the same breath he will contradict it. And if he doesn't contradict it, one of his key consiglieres will contradict what was said the previous day, either by him or by one of their colleagues in the sort of upper echelons of this remarkable regime. It is, I mean, impossible to do anything normal. But how many times have you heard me say that? How many times have you heard me say there is no point deploying the normal tools of analysis or journalism when you are dealing with this man? And it's true. It's simply true. There just isn't, because there is no precedent for somebody saying he's won a war, but he hasn't won a war. Somebody saying it's over, but it's not over. Somebody saying we're having peace negotiations with a party that responds by saying, no, we're not. It is utterly, utterly unprecedented. 7 minutes after 10 is the time. I think the reason why I'm not finding it funny today in the way that I was at the beginning of the week is because I'm getting rather frightened about what's going to happen next. And of course, you can't even do that in a traditional or normal fashion, because you can't use the tools you would normally use to work out what is going to happen next. I mean, how likely is it that Donald Trump doesn't know what's going to happen next? But if this were a chessboard and we pretended for a moment that he is not a pigeon, to deploy that rather splendid metaphor and the pointlessness of trying to do battle with a pigeon on a chessboard, but if we pretend he's not a pigeon who will knock over all the pieces, defecate all over the board, and then strut around as if he's played a game that Garry Kasparov would be proud of. Let's pretend he's not a pigeon. He's pushing his pieces to the centre of the board. He is sending thousands of Americans, other people's children, to the Middle East, along with potentially fighter jet squadrons and armoured vehicles. We know that 5,000 Marines are on the way, and we know that 2,000 paratroopers from the 82nd Airborne Division are also on their way to the Gulf. They were ordered to deploy earlier this week. And Why would he do that if he wasn't intending to use them? If he wasn't intending to deploy them properly to send them into war? Why would he do that if he was truly conducting peace negotiations? Why would he do that if the peace negotiations he claims he is conducting were, as he says, and I quote, going very well? And he has announced another pause on the deadline for them to reopen the Strait, moments before they announced that the Strait remains absolutely and categorically closed to all allies of the United States and Israel. So it's the bombing of the power plants, and that could he could do that now. So one argument that doesn't work, if you were thinking of making it, one argument that doesn't work is that he can't deliver on the threats that he's making until the troops that are on their way to the Middle East get there. Because he could bomb the power plants now. We know that he could. He would be doing so, of course, without necessarily, well, definitely he'd be doing so without the support of the United Kingdom, for example, which will support attacks upon positions that are attacking us or our allies, but would not be supportive of any attempt to... I mean, it's a war crime for a start to bomb power plants, although we live in a world where war crimes like that are committed with relative impunity by allies of the United States of America. So that can't be the reason. He's paused the threatened bombing for another 10 days, but he could do it tomorrow. They haven't reopened the Strait of Hormuz. He claims that he's conducting peace negotiations, a claim that the Iranians reject. He claims that they are going very well, but that is a meaningless contribution, isn't it? If we don't even know for sure that they're happening. There's a 15-point peace plan doing the rounds that looks like a slightly watered-down version of the one that Barack Obama secured over a decade ago and Donald Trump decided to set fire to when he was president of the United States the first time round. And the most important element of this, I think, and this is one of the things we should talk about today, the most important thing that's going on now, if you can cut through all that noise and contradiction, the war is over but it's not over, there are peace negotiations going on but there aren't peace negotiations going on, they're going very well, they're not going on at all, I'll bomb them tomorrow if they don't do what I want, I won't bomb them tomorrow and they haven't done what I want. If you can ignore all the noise, what's the most important thing that's happened in the last week? It's the troops, right? Or if you disagree, you know what to do. 0345 60 60 973. It's the troops. And here's what worries me. And I don't have a frame of reference for this, really. I don't know what was happening on radio programs like this shortly before the Iraq war, for example, or Afghanistan. If I was in the job, I wouldn't remember. My brain doesn't work like that. I don't keep a diary. I don't have... Do you have that kind of 20/20 hindsight where you can just remember how things happen? But surely, as a schoolboy, I remember the Falklands. I remember my godfather had a chart on his wall, a map on his wall at home in the kitchen, and they were following the progress when we went to visit of the task force as it made its way to the South Atlantic, and you knew what was going on and you knew why. We can't do that, right? So my fear this morning is that we're not properly registering the significance of the troops, the deployment of the 82nd Airborne and the Marines. We're not properly recognising the significance of that because of all the noise and madness that's going on. And it's still Trump, but these troops are real. So the things that you can handle in a normal sense are the things that are real, if you like, and material, as opposed to notional and abstract. So you can say that the moon is made of cheese. In fact, you can convince 52% of the British population that the moon is made of cheese if you want to go back to 2016. But you can go to the moon and smell the cheese, taste the cheese, check the territory, and you know that it is not made of cheese. So we can sit here and talk about what Donald Trump is doing and what he isn't doing, what he's threatening and what he isn't threatening. The war is over, but the war's not over. We need help, but we don't need help. There are peace negotiations going on, but there aren't peace negotiations going on. I'm going to bomb them if they don't do what I want. They haven't done what I want. I haven't bombed them. We can do all of that, and we have to, because otherwise we'd go a little bit mad. But what you can't do is say, oh, he's sending 7,000 personnel to the Gulf, and then in the next breath say, oh, no, he isn't. Do you see what I mean? I know this is a statement of the bleeding obvious, but I think it's important to cling on to the things that we know, the things that cannot be contradicted in 10 minutes' time, the things that cannot be refuted tomorrow. So Marco Rubio cannot say today, oh, no, that's not true. We haven't sent 5,000 Marines and 2,000 paratroopers from the 82nd Airborne Division to the Gulf, because we know that they have. It's my favourite phrase, isn't it? That's not an opinion, that's counting. Everything that is an opinion or even a claim or a statement is utterly pointless now. Because if he says it at 14 minutes after 10 on Friday, March the 27th, he could quite easily be in the bulletin at 10:30 on Friday, March the 27th, that he's now said the polar opposite. And we still, as a profession, don't know how to report it on both sides of the Atlantic. We know that. I've done that. You know this. But what you can't do is dismiss this in the same way. You can't say, oh, he's sending 7,000 personnel to the Gulf, and then 2 minutes later, J.D. Vance pops up and says, oh, no, he's not actually. That's not true. I don't know. So that's the bit that we know to be true. So if I said to you, what's the most important thing that's happened this week? Tragically, we have to dismiss all of the he said, she said. We cannot include commentary and claims. You can't trust the Iranian regime either, of course. It's something that is important to remember, but we did find ourselves in the extraordinary position of thinking they're probably more likely to be telling the truth in this moment than the President of the United States of America. So you cannot analyse, digest or process anything that gets filed under abstract. Anything that gets filed under claim or counterclaim. You cannot. There is no point. All you can do is look at the stuff that is definitely true and definitely happening. And if we look at the stuff that is definitely true and definitely happening, I think, and I'm no military historian, I'm certainly no military expert, I think the fact that he's sending 5,000 Marines and 2,000 paratroopers, with reports in Washington that another 10,000 supported by fighter jet squadrons and armoured vehicles are on the table, are being considered, is a hell of a lot more important than we're giving it credit for. I think. And that's the phone in. What happens if he sends thousands and thousands of Americans to war, and a ground war, boots on the ground? That's question number one. What would it mean? What would boots on? It's a phrase we use somewhat glibly, isn't it? And that's not a criticism. We're a weird species, us humans, and sometimes we only process the really, really big stuff by somehow minimising and diminishing it in our minds. Boots on the ground, it's blood being spilt, American blood, other people's children he's sending potentially to die in order to probably postpone the humiliation of admitting that he never should have started this war in the first place. Tragically, it is a rhetorical question to say to you, do you think Donald Trump would sacrifice other people's children to simply postpone the moment when he has to admit that this has all been a terrible mistake? Not that he ever would admit it, but when it becomes irrefutable in the eyes of many, many Americans, never mind the rest of the world. Do you think he would? How many Americans do you think, how many lives do you think he'd happily sacrifice in order to protect his own ego? That is an absolutely terrifying question, because you know that the answer is infinite. How many people would he sacrifice? How many Americans would he sacrifice in order to protect his own ego? Countless. So what's the most important thing that's happened this week? Probably the thing we've talked about least. The 5,000 Marines, the 2,000 paratroopers. What happens? 0345 60 60973. What happens? And I think we'll allow ourselves a speculation question today, because, as I've established on many times in recent days, there's no rules now. If the president is not abiding by any rules, whether it's international law or the basic rules of common decency, then the business of analysing what he does ceases to have any rules to follow as well. So you know as much about this as anybody does. Do you think he's going to do it? Do you think he's going to do it? Because I do. I think he's going to. I don't see why he would be sending Marines. I think you've got a mad emperor sitting in his ivory tower. I don't know if you're familiar with The Queen and the Soldier. A beautiful song by Suzanne Vega, probably one of my Desert Island Discs, if they ever blooming ask me. And it just depicts an all-powerful monarch who doesn't even really know why they're waging war. They just are. I think he's going to do it. I don't see what else happens next. Iran aren't going to capitulate. It doesn't look like they're going to open the Strait of Hormuz anytime soon. They're unlikely to sign up to any deal because look what happened last time they signed up to a deal with an American president. Another American president who wasn't trustworthy or honest came along and tore up the deal that had been signed by an American president who was trustworthy and honest. So what happens next? Answer, boots on the ground. Question, what does that mean? 0345 60 60973 is the number you need. Is it going to happen? And if it does, what happens? Is it going to happen? And if it does, what does it mean? What would it represent? Can I do a phone-in about how scared you are? How scared are you? I mean, the only thing we can derive some comfort from is the fact that it is vanishingly, I would say impossible that UK troops would be deployed in any way, shape or form in this ludicrous ego trip. But I don't know what your humanity is like. Mine extends to Americans. Mine extends to our allies. It extends to people even who perhaps still haven't felt the scales fall from their eyes with regard to Donald Trump's depravity. I feel for the people that are going to go to war on his whim. Because right now, and it's 20 minutes past 10, and I may have changed my mind by 11, it's going to depend entirely on what you say. Right now, I think it's probably going to happen. And I don't think that we're ready for it. I don't think the world is ready for it because it is an act of such obvious madness. But if you can say anything with confidence about Donald Trump, it is that he does things that are obviously mad. 20 minutes after 10 is the time. Listen, if you are in favour of a war in Iran, please don't think that I have got confidence in what I'm saying or indeed qualifications to say it. I'm just looking at what you're looking at and arriving at an honest conclusion. If your honest conclusion is that this is a good thing and he has to do it, then I want to hear your reasoning. I want to hear your thinking as well. Because right now, as I've said a million times since this mess started, all bets are off. Hit the numbers now. You will get through.
James O'Brien on LBC.
22 minutes after 10 is the time, and I think that we have correctly recalibrated, not laughing today, even at the Scooby-Doo stuff from yesterday, which had me in hysterics, but feeling a lot more serious about things today. And I think the reason why is the troops that are heading to the Gulf and the difficulty in believing that they're going for any other reason than to escalate a war that is being fought solely to assuage Donald Trump's ego. Let's go to Hamilton. Kareem is in Hamilton. Kareem, what would you like to say?
Good morning, James. How are you?
I'm good, mate. What's on your mind?
I think yourself and Starmer, ultimately, from our point of view, understand we're talking about Trump at the minute, but I think you're one of the only ones who's sort of cutting through the noise here, and I think that's all of this is noise. Yeah. I think this is the exact same as what happened during the Gulf War in Afghanistan, that American soldiers and possibly eventually our soldiers are going to end up getting killed on the whim of...
Well, hang on. I mean, thank you for the kind words, but I'm going to argue with you immediately because, Afghanistan was a NATO operation. Article 5 was triggered because the attack on September the 11th had been sponsored by or certainly sheltered by the Taliban, and the war against Iraq, although 2020 hindsight gives us a rather different picture, Blair and Bush were desperate to secure UN approval for that war as well. So the parallels, I'm afraid, are completely non-existent. This is much worse and much madder by any measure.
100%. I can't argue back to that. I think you're 100% right. Possibly what's even worse, as you're saying, is that this is simply an individual whim.
Yes.
it's simply one man who is going to take, again, soldiers and innocent people to their death just for ego. It really is just for ego. I can't believe we're in a position that is being allowed. It often reminds me of that Love Actually scene when the British Prime Minister stands up to the American. I think it's the world's maybe need to. And
do you think that the just for the record, they didn't get the UN resolution on that war, Bush and Blair, but they were desperate to secure it and failed. I mean, that was the second resolution authorising war, as opposed to the one that they went to war on, which was based on Iraq's failure to cooperate with weapons inspectors. I'm just pointing out the difference in context. There is still a very strong case for arguing that war was illegal, but not in the way that this one obviously and already is. Do you think it's because this is something that I'm fascinated by, it's the hugeness of it that prompts us to turn away? I think of that Leonardo DiCaprio film where you've got the meteor heading towards the Earth, and the population split probably 52-48 between people who are absolutely terrified of what they know is going to happen and people who are just carrying on regardless and blithely presuming that someone else is going to deal with it, and they're not looking up, of course, which is what the film is called. Do you think that is part of the problem for everybody in the chatter in classes, in the commentariat, in the opposition benches? I think Starmer and his colleagues are aware of the gravity of the situation, but for the rest of us, it's almost too huge to contemplate. He's going to put troops on the ground in Iran 20-odd years after they did it in Iraq. Yep,
100%. The problem here is that there's far too much noise. This is going back to the original point I made about yourself. The people who are making the noise, like Farage, etc., in this country.
Well, he's gone very quiet for once, actually. So I think even he probably somewhere inside recognises, until he sees an opportunity to change his position or to claim the polar opposite of what he was claiming yesterday for reasons of self-enrichment or self-advancement. But the people who were calling for the war have gone quiet. No one's really now arguing that Keir Starmer made a mistake by not getting involved.
I just think it's impossible for your average Joe to know what's really going on, and it just becomes this big cloud you can't work through. You just can't get to the facts, and then if you can't get to the facts, you can't get to the consequences, and people just aren't really aware.
Yeah, and that is why I'm increasingly, not depressed, that would be the wrong word to use, dismayed at the way in which we have been simultaneously detailing the madness that you describe, but also getting distracted by it from this fact that makes the bedrock of today's show, that thousands of American military personnel are on their way to the Gulf, with many more reportedly possibly to follow. And what does that mean? 0345 6060 Tony's in Greenock. Tony, what would you like to say?
Hi, James. The question was what happens to the troops. I think that there will be a lot of American casualties here. I think Trump is gunning for a conflict, to extend the conflict.
Why do you think he wants to extend the conflict?
There's probably multiple reasons for that, and many of which you've discussed in
we have. But shows. And again, we're falling into the trap of thinking it's worth asking, because he claims he's already won, doesn't he?
Yeah.
I can't, sometimes the things I say out loud I can't believe are true. He claims he's already won, and we're having a phone-in about the fact that 7,000 military personnel are already on their way there to join a war that's over.
Yeah, well, everything he says is counter to what he said last time. And, I think the three main reasons are personal enrichment, and the next one is to just deflect from his own personal issues around Epstein and things like that.
Everything at home.
The third one is ultimately just to create a situation at home where he says, wait a minute, guys, we're at war here. Do we really need to have elections? Do we really need to do this? Let's just see how this plays out, and then, while we're at war, let's not have, like Zelensky. He'll say, well, look at Zelensky, they're at war, and he's not having elections, so why should we have elections when we're at war? He's creating a situation where he's going to be dictator for life, or as long as he wants. I mean, he's not listening to any military
expertise
on this. You listen to all these ex-generals and commanders.
So then it becomes you're putting flesh upon the bones of the ego theory. How many Americans would he sacrifice? How many American lives would he sacrifice in order to feed his ego? And feeding the ego, under your analysis, involves postponing the midterm elections and possibly even future presidential elections, which is, of course, why you have in Orwell, who we've come back to once again, because, my goodness me, that book just gets better and better and better the more you get exposed to the things that he was warning about. Perpetual war. We have always been at war with East Asia. And I mean, it still, for me, sounds fanciful, but some of the stuff that sounded fanciful 6 months ago happened. Some of the stuff that sounded fanciful 12 months ago happened 6 months ago. So the stuff that sounds fanciful today, happening next month, well, you wouldn't bet against it. And if you did bet against it, you'd be a kind of braver better than me. 10:30 is the time. Dominic Ellis has your headlines.
James O'Brien on LBC.
It's 33 minutes after 10, and, you know, the stuff you don't notice because you're noticing the stuff that you do notice. I think we've called it right today, clearly. The fact that the troops are making their way to the Gulf and many more are reportedly likely to follow is absolutely terrifying. And not least because, well, war is always terrifying, or it should be, of course. This is one of the problems with the White House, is they put up memes and things that are like Call of Duty clips. They seem to see it all as a video game or a meme war. There's been a story, in fact, we'll dig it out. There's been a story about how dismayed many military veterans and veterans organisations are about the cartoonish way in which White House social media accounts depict military engagement, absolutely forgetting the seriousness of the situation, ignoring, possibly not even appreciating the seriousness of the situation. You know that Trump thinks that soldiers are losers and saps, especially the ones that died. He insulted the memory of John McCain for being taken prisoner, I think, in Vietnam, and refusing. John McCain refused to leave. He would have been entitled to release as a senior officer, but he refused to go if he couldn't take his troop with him. I think I've remembered that correctly. I sat next to his daughter once at a function. The stuff you get distracted from also includes the fact that Russia is sending aid to Iran while Donald Trump continues to favour Vladimir Putin over Volodymyr Zelensky. We'll get back into the boots on the ground imminently, but the stuff that you get distracted from by focusing on the stuff that you're focusing on is immeasurable. I'll say that again. And I haven't mentioned NATO, attacking NATO, complaining that NATO won't help him 10 minutes after threatening to invade a NATO country. A hostile invasion of a NATO country, and then 10 minutes later saying, why aren't NATO aren't doing enough to help my illegal war? And then the Iran-Russia angle, Putin enjoying everything that's happened since Donald Trump became president, probably nothing more than this, offering support, financial, military, political, to Iran to prolong the fighting that is supposedly over, according to Donald Trump, except when he says that it isn't and that he needs our help, until he says that he doesn't. But Iran is being supported by Russia, and its illegal invasion of Ukraine is still essentially being excused by Donald Trump, who's fighting against Iran. He's somehow managed to pursue a policy of kindness towards the staunchest ally of his enemy. And he's sending American troops to the Gulf where they could be killed by Russian weapons, while simultaneously favouring Vladimir Putin over Volodymyr Zelensky in Ukraine. I've done it again. I got distracted by the stuff that I got distracted by. But it matters, right? Because all of this is context for the madness of putting boots on the ground in Iran. If, indeed, you agree that it's madness. And for the record, you absolutely don't have to. I'd love to be talked out of it, or even talked into the idea that we've got... I mean, while there is plenty to worry about, this is somehow the right course of action. But unless we get somebody from the comment pages of the Daily Telegraph ringing in, I can't imagine anybody with a fully functioning brain is going to be able or be minded to make that case. But I hope you can. I hope someone can. Dave's in Caerphilly. Dave, what would you like to say?
Oh, hi, James. First-time caller. Big fan. Listened to you for years.
Thank you, mate. You're very kind.
This is actually a little more like nerve-wracking than I thought it would be, just ringing in. But anyway, not too...
You're doing great.
Thanks, James. I'll take that. Right, so principally, I kind of look at it like this, right? It's like pieces on a chessboard. He sent that Armada to the Middle East, and he sent it for a reason. He was always going to use it. Now, we can kind of talk about whether or not he was kind of pushed into it by Israel, by Netanyahu, but regardless, if you kind of look at it, the kind of crux of it is he sent that fleet with the sole intention of it being used. He's not doing it just for the sake of it. So the same principle, applies, therefore, to the troops. He's clearly going to do it. And then you ask yourself, like you said, it's bewildering, the madness of it. The whole thing is just bonkers. But then you kind of think, well, what is the proximate cause and how do we kind of get to that? And I keep hearing, and it is conspiracy and it's speculation, but that's, I guess, that's what we're dealing with now. But this kind of link to Russia, as you've just been outlining and setting out, you think to yourself, like, I kind of hear that kind of conspiracy theory that they've got something on him. And that kind of goes back decades to, when being the president of the US was not even a kind of, a kind of notion that had crossed his mind. But, it's whether or not they have significant blackmail material on him.
I don't know if that matters. Again, I'm not dismissing it anymore. And of course, Christopher Steele has put some flesh on these bones, but I don't even know if that matters. Because I don't think that... He just loves the idea of leaders that can do whatever they want. He can't help himself. He says it out loud, whether he's talking about sexually assaulting women or whether he's talking about bombing civilians. He says, I can do what I want. It's the phrase that sums him up most. I can do what I want. I can do what I want. I can do what I want. So if there's blackmail, if there's compromat, doesn't really matter. He looks at Vladimir Putin, and while normal, decent people feel revulsion, he feels envy and admiration.
I know. I think you might be right. It's so difficult to kind of...
We don't have to try. Today, what do you think is going to happen next? Do you think he would be sending troops to the Gulf for any reason other than deploying them?
He's 100% going to deploy them. It's not a case of if, it's when. And the fact that they're going to send 10,000 more is going to bolster the initial kind of... They've got enough there now with 7,000 troops to take Karg Island. That's really going to kind of...
I think they have, but Iran has arguably been preparing for this kind of invasion since about 1979, so the idea that it would be easy is perhaps a little fanciful. And how many echoes are we hearing now of conversations that were held years ago about Iraq or even Afghanistan, where victory was... What was it George W. Bush talked about? Complete victory? Would you remember the phrase? There was a phrase, wasn't there, that he talked about, and it was wrong. It turned out to be wrong. I don't think he knew it was wrong at the time. But the Taliban was just essentially hiding. It was defeated but not defeated. It was just pausing. And now it's back in charge in Kabul. 2211 is the time. 03456060973 is the number you need. I've got a message that offers up an alternative analysis. James writes, Bill in Wales. A lot of Welsh and Scottish callers today. That's nice, isn't it? You're falling for Trump's bluff, which is what you're supposed to do. So it's working. He's trying to put pressure on Iran by sending troops down. He's not going to invade Iran, my friend. Iran's 90 million population, 1 million soldiers. Come on, turn your brain on. You can do it. He's putting pressure on Iran, and thank goodness he's doing it. I presume you want the Iranian radical leaders to stop killing their own people. Just asking. You don't seem to mention it ever. 30,000 people slaughtered. That's Bill from Wales. Listen, Bill, I presume that made sense when you pressed send, did it? Or at least you thought it did. But I'm saying this genuinely. I'd need you to just try again, really. He is doing it as leverage. So he's not threatening to bomb their power plants. He's moving troops to scare them into doing the thing that he has told them they have to do, otherwise he'd bomb the power plants. So why has he threatened to bomb the power plants? 03456060973 is the number that you need. Paul's in Cambridge. Paul, what would you like to say?
Well, as ever, James, number one, thank you for the Scooby-Doo. I was crying laughing when I saw that.
Yeah, I'm not laughing today. I mean, that was proper laughter. It was a little bit hysterical in retrospect, perhaps, as a consequence of the seriousness that we've been distracted from.
I agree, yeah, but it still gave me a smile before the news hit me. Now, the thing we do with Trump, and you've said it yourself, is that we treat him like he's got a brain. And that he's not an idiot, but he is an actual idiot by definition of the word idiot. And so what he's doing, we can't even worry about it. What we've got to worry about is what people like Stephen Miller, Netanyahu, Putin, and maybe MBS are thinking, because it's their thinking that drives his actions. He can't put... He's a guy who uses two sides of the toilet paper. This guy is really... Well,
I kind of disagree with you a bit. I mean, in the sense that I do worry about what the other people are doing, but he's the one that makes the calls, isn't he? He's the one that makes the final decisions. He's the one that pushes the proverbial button, and yes. Whether he is an idiot or not, or whether he's something a little bit more diabolical than that, or whether he is completely sane. And I think this is the point Bill in Wales was making. We're just too slow on the uptake to see what a genius he is. That's still a possibility, I suppose, technically. But in terms of whether or not he is prepared to put American blood on Iranian soil is a crucial question. And obviously Netanyahu is going to carry on doing whatever he wants to do, regardless of what Donald Trump tells him. And the King of Saudi Arabia reportedly wants the escalation to continue, and the amount of money that's sloshing around Trump's family that is coming straight out of Saudi Arabia probably gives him a slightly louder voice in these processes than he would have in a normal universe. But is Trump prepared to sacrifice American soldiers on the altar of what looks like his own ego? Answer, yes. Of course he is.
Of course he is. It doesn't affect him. It doesn't affect him one iota. This is one thing you have to understand about Trump. If it doesn't affect him, he doesn't care. He doesn't care about climate change because he'll be dead when it happens. That's how he looks at things.
Or he doesn't even believe it because the money clouds or closes down his judgment. So
no, he believes in his self-interest. I agree with you on that, but he doesn't care.
What will it mean for the rest of us if the United States of America launches a ground war in Iran?
Well, it's going to be horrific, isn't it?
I think
the only glimmer, I thought he was going to just look for an easy exit and say he'd won. Look for one last
I did as well.
And I really thought he's looking for a way out. He's bored. If anything, he's bored.
He did half of that. He claimed he'd won when he hadn't, which was half of the theory, but that would then involve upping sticks and going home, which he didn't do. So he claimed he'd won when he hadn't, but carried on fighting, which is even madder in a way.
Well, he claimed he won a war, which isn't a war, but he won it anyway. So, I mean, it's very confusing. It's very confusing, James. But,
it is, but that's why today, and I'm trying to cut through the chaff of confusion, because whether it's deliberate or not doesn't really matter. It is confusing. That's a matter of fact and record. But but that's why today's conversation is about very, very specifically the likelihood of the troops that are currently being sent to the Gulf being sent for a reason. And if the reason is simply leverage, then it makes a mockery of the current threats regarding the bombing of power plants. If the reason is something other than that, something that hasn't yet been talked about, then we should be very afraid, I think. And confusion is forgivable. It's inevitable, in fact. But fear is absolutely necessary. 10:45 is the time.
James O'Brien on LBC.
48 is the time. Do you worry sometimes that you've imagined something or there's a little piece of the jigsaw that possibly you dreamt about last night and woke up thinking was true? I just had a little bit of a panic then that I'd imagined the bit about veterans complaining. But no, veterans and the families of US soldiers killed in combat have rebuked President Donald Trump's White House over its use of memes in social media posts addressing the Iran conflict, saying it trivializes their sacrifices. I mean, I don't think "to be fair" is quite the right phrase to use, but the people like Dick Littlejohn in the Daily Mail demanding that Keir Starmer get involved in this war, or, of course, claiming that he had never been more ashamed to be British when Keir Starmer elected not to, have stopped talking about that entirely, their cowardice on this occasion, overcoming their incompetence. But how would you write about this if you were still under the impression or still pursuing the lie that Donald Trump is not all of the things his critics have been describing him as? I'm pausing, you can tell from my voice. It's just disgusting. The White House, and I haven't seen all of them. 13 American lives, that was 2 days ago. I hope it hasn't gone up since. Another 200 injured already in the war. That's 13 dead Americans, 200 injured. And the White House has been firing out social media posts containing pop cultural references to everything from Call of Duty and Top Gun to Marvel movies, SpongeBob SquarePants, Grand Theft Auto, which is a video game, and Dragon Ball Z. They mash up news footage with clips from popular films, games, TV shows and music videos, which is pure Hunger Games territory, isn't it? And again, it's something else you may not have been aware of because there is so much that you are aware of and stuff gets squeezed out. But that is what you're looking at. Families of dead soldiers complaining that they're treating the war and, of course, the ultimate sacrifice, the ultimate patriotic act, as a video game or a cartoon. And this isn't him. This is his White House. It's just full of people who are disgusting and depraved. SpongeBob SquarePants. And it's coming out of the White House. It's not some online edgelord, some online incel, some online weirdo in a dirty old dressing gown on a Tesco laptop in his mum's back bedroom. This is people in the White House putting together news footage of a war that's already claimed 13 American lives and splicing it with action from video games, Hollywood films and SpongeBob SquarePants cartoons. 10:51 is the time. Antwi is in Prague in the Czech Republic. Antwi, what would you like to say?
Hey, James, how you doing, man?
I'm good. What's on your mind?
Yeah, so definitely the caller Dave, before the last caller, he hit it at the end of his speech that Karg Island would be probably the key component in this whole crazy game, that Trump wants to definitely invade that island so he can take control of the oil refineries and somehow miraculously figure out the issue with the Strait of Hormuz, which is nonsense. Iran has nothing to lose, so they're going to bomb the hell out of that island. Once the first foot of an American soldier gets or steps on that island, destroy even more the entire craziness that's happening now in Europe. It's 50 crowns per liter of diesel. That's 170 p in pounds. So it's pretty similar. We all feel the pain. America doesn't feel that pain yet because they haven't got hit by the wave of the oil prices and the gas prices, although it's already $4 a gallon.
So he thinks it's Venezuela. I mean, if we and again, you're doing that thing that I'm keen to do less of today than previous days, where we are trying to essentially nail jelly to the wall, or Jello for my American listeners, or to sort of herd cats, because these are rational responses to an almost certainly irrational man. But in terms of the deployment, why on earth would he do it? Doesn't really matter. Is it to postpone the elections? Is it to protect his ego? I mean, the question is, do you think he's going to do it? To which your answer is also yes. Why would he be sending these troops there if he wasn't going to send them to fight and potentially die?
Exactly, and that's the craziest part. We have TSA lines at airports, and Trump, meanwhile, is getting his America First award from the Republican Party. I'm not sure if you saw that.
I played it yesterday. This is because Mike Johnson's invented another award after the head of FIFA, Sicafantini, gave him the FIFA Peace Prize. Now Mike Johnson's joined in and invented an award to give to him.
That is, and that's the state of America for you. It's insane. I'm super depressed. I'm staying in Europe for now, and I don't know. I mean, the only thing we can do is just elect them out of office, at least in the midterm elections, which he will try to rig as well, is my worry. But with the SAFE Act, the reason why the TSA agents are not getting paid is because the Republicans are blocking the actual bill, saying that if the SAFE Act is not part of that bill, they're not going to release the funds to have TSA funded. And this is just like hostage. I don't know. I'll stop here.
No, well, there's one thing I want to know. If I mean, it's 13 dead Americans already.
I think it's more. I'm sorry.
Yeah, you're probably right. But what happens, regardless of the price of gasoline, what happens when more body bags start coming back to the United States of America? I don't see how he rides that one out.
His approval rating is at 36% by most of the polls at this moment. It's going to go down to 27, 25. Definitely is going to have an impact. One thing before we pass the torch to the next callers, I want to give a huge shout out to one of your correspondents, Simon Marks.
Of course.
I dig the man. He is the man. I follow the news from him and just want to give him a big shout out, sir.
Yeah, well, our good news is he'll be with us at 11:45 today with his latest bulletin. And it's odd, actually. An awful lot of your countrymen and women are turning to Simon Marks' coverage on YouTube because some, of course, American outlets are struggling to deal with the new realities. One of which we may play a little clip of later, actually, a very, very good American journalist picking him up on that. I did actually, maybe Simon did it in his last dispatch on the Florida voting question and the fact that he himself elected to vote by mail while portraying voting by mail as a heinous offence. Wasn't Henry supposed to be looking into that? Because Farage voted by mail as well and then claimed that he'd delivered his ballot by hand on the day of the election, and that would have involved driving all the way from Clacton to his own constituency and then driving back again on the day of the last election. I thought we were looking into whether or not that was actually true or not. It is 10:56. Antwi, thank you. From Prague to Ledbury. Don's there. Don, what made you pick up the phone?
Morning, James,
Hello.
and thanks for your deep analysis this week. It all makes perfect sense.
I mean, you're being very kind, but I mean,
Yeah,
it does though. Thank you.
I'll start with that, but 2 points I'd make.
Yes.
First of all, the complete absence of US military direction in any of this.
Yeah.
Very early doors, a lot of the senior American military folks in the Pentagon resigned on principle. The US military is not standing up. The fact is, if we put boots on the ground, as you put it earlier, and young Americans get killed, those senior military leaders are accountable. They will be accountable in the fullness of time for not standing up and protecting the people and following illegal orders. And we know that following orders is not an excuse.
Well, he tried to, I mean, just in a different context, when some US politicians urged Coast Guards not to obey illegal orders by blowing up people in the sea. He tried to get them prosecuted. He tried to get politicians telling law and order professionals not to obey illegal orders. He tried to criminalise the people telling the people not to obey illegal orders. So we know where he sits on it. You sound as if you know what you're talking about when it comes to...
I'm an ex-RAF officer.
Right.
It was drummed into me that I never ever had to follow illegal orders.
Really?
And I had to protect my people.
Gosh.
I never had cause to do that, thankfully. But there seems to be a complete absence at the moment of that influence in the senior US military making that point.
Well, I mean, this was the difference between the first term and the second term, wasn't it? Is that there were people in the room who were voices of reason, who would tell him things he didn't want to hear, who would remind him of the law. And you know, there are infamous examples of him being told, you can't do that, it's illegal. Those people aren't in the room anymore.
I think that's absolutely correct. And the whole thing seems to be completely lawless. Maybe my second point is very short. This is all about Trumpian economics, you know.
Go on.
The whole mishmash of deploying troops, making threats, the tackle reaction at the 11th hour.
Yeah.
The only person, or the only people benefiting from this, Trump himself, his family, and those in his inner circle.
I wish I was a year younger. I wish I still clung to the idea that, no, that's just too out there. I mean, he's dodgy and he's depraved and he's all of these things, but the idea that they're just filling the pockets of themselves and their friends with every announcement and every climb down and every... I'm afraid that the 14-minute business earlier this week, the fact that the gap between those huge bets being placed, and those are just the ones that we know about, you know, about 14 minutes before the social media announcement, that destroyed my last vestiges of naivety, Don, and I'm not going to argue with you now today.
And my point there is, you know, here we have 5,000, 7,000 youngsters sent to war against an army of 1 million.
Yeah.
For all the wrong reasons. Where are the US military senior leaders?
What should they be doing?
I'm afraid standing up, making the voices heard, and if necessary, refusing the orders and resigning.
And that hasn't happened at all?
Very, very publicly. Very, very publicly. Because, but as you said, I think it was yesterday you said, you know, it's amazing that 36% of the American electorate still support this idiot.
Yeah.
And you'd be gobsmacked if it were only 6%. I share that sentiment. But there is no senior military voice in this. And the absence of that is critical.
Yeah, I mean, because if there was, they would be up in arms, of course, about the issue I explained a moment ago, veterans and families of US soldiers killed in combat. I mean, just disgusted by the White House's social media game, deploying SpongeBob SquarePants clips to essentially glorify an illegal war. And if military top brass aren't shouting about that or calling that out, then they're unlikely to call out further deployments. I mean, it's terrifying, actually. Former US Colonel, retired US Army Colonel Joe Pacino telling the Washington Post they're completely diminishing what they're asking the nation to do in Iraq. That speaks to Don's point, in that if everybody understood exactly what he was asking these soldiers to do, then you'd like to think there would be more rejection and more opposition.
James O'Brien on LBC.
It is 5 minutes after 11. The German Foreign Ministry announcing that the United States and Iran, or representatives thereof, are to meet in Pakistan, whether or not that is a peace negotiation that will be operating in tandem with or as a rival to the peace negotiation that Donald Trump claims is already well underway and has been going brilliantly, even as he threatens to bomb all the power plants if they don't reopen the Strait of Hormuz, while claiming that the war is already over and has been won in a glorious fashion, and complaining that nobody's helped him while insisting that he doesn't need any help, and of course sending currently thousands of young American service personnel to the Gulf, including, and this is the important bit, the 82nd Airborne Division, whose job is essentially to parachute into hostile or contested territory and secure things like airfields. That's what the 82nd does. The Marines would be deployed usually a little bit differently, evacuating civilians, disaster relief. That's who you'd send in to support a US embassy, that kind of unit. But the 82nd Airborne very much come out of Fort Bragg in North Carolina, and they are trained to parachute into hostile or contested territory to secure key positions, including airfields. What do you do? You ask a White House spokeswoman what's going on, and she will say, and indeed Anna Kelly has said, President Trump always has all military options at his disposal. This is a report from the Associated Press earlier this week, writing that at least 1,000 troops were heading to the Middle East in the coming days. That's gone up to 2,000 subsequently, with the report today, Telegraph picking up on US reports that another 10,000 more troops, supported by fighter jet squadrons and armoured vehicles, could be on their way there too. So, steering you back to questions that we haven't really answered yet, although this is very much a collegiate exercise. This is very much a have your say, get it off your chest kind of morning, because we're talking about the stuff we probably should have been talking about a little bit sooner, but we didn't, because we were talking about all the other stuff that we were talking about. The troops, the significance of these troops, and the ramifications of their deployment. If, as most of us agree, Bill in Wales notwithstanding, and so far Bill's the only voice I've seen in my inbox, not of the view that of course he is minded to deploy these troops, otherwise he wouldn't send them at all. I think the notion that they are leverage or just things to bring pressure to bear on the Iranians is, for me at least, from my understanding of the situation, that argument is completely destroyed by the fact that he currently has the full capability to bomb power plants and has repeatedly threatened to do so, and then capitulated and then chickened out, if that's the right language to use. But what would it mean? Do we know? Maybe we don't know. Don in Ledbury there, ex-RAF, there'll be plenty of ex-military or even serving military listening to this. I don't know what you can and can't tell me. I've had one message from somebody who used to work very much in this field. I may share that with you shortly as well. I don't know what it means. I mean, what happened in Iraq? You can tell me that. I can tell you that. What happened in Afghanistan? I can tell you that. You can tell me that. But if thousands of Americans are deployed on the ground in Iran, and as a couple of callers have suggested, the clever money, for what that's worth, says that it would originally be on this island that is the heart of Iran's oil export operation. That would be the island, the Karg Island, that the 82nd would be most likely to parachute into. What would that mean? Trump perhaps thinks that he would be able to just take over all the oil in the way that they seem to have done in Venezuela. No regime change. When you put the deputy of the last person in charge, you're not really changing the regime. You're just changing perhaps the identity of the fingers in the till. And you're swapping out Maduro's fingers, in Donald Trump's case, for your own. And he thinks possibly that he'll be able to do that in Iran as well. I wonder if we underprice the observation an earlier caller made about economics. I think that was Don in Ledbury as well. But, again, we overcomplicate things. At every turn and with every choice, he is just looking at money. Self-enrichment. Not even enrichment of the American economy or the Treasury. It's every single thing he does has got a payoff somewhere down the line for him or his. And again, a year ago, I'd have scoffed at that. My normalcy bias would have kicked in and I'd have said, no, look, he's bad, but it can't be that naked. It can't be that blatant. It can't be that obvious. Maybe it is. But, of course, we don't know what that would mean if these troops were parachuted into or onto the island that is at the very heart of Iran's oil export operation. Should we have a go at working it out? If you think you can talk about it, I mean, 1 million people in the Iranian army, that seems to be the received wisdom. Well, how do you fight 1 million people with 7,000? What on earth is going to happen next? And the one thing you can't do is say, oh, well, that can't be what's going to happen, because that's bonkers. I'm afraid that ship has sailed, if you pardon the pun. That ship sailed quite a long time ago. No, that's too bonkers. The bonkers rule, the bonkers threshold is irrelevant. It doesn't exist anymore. You can't say, when you're looking at a potential for an international conflagration, a world war, if you like, you can no longer say, oh, well, that won't happen, because that would be too bonkers. Because of the people involved. You can't say that anymore. What can you say? What would it mean? What would happen? 11 minutes after 11 is the time. Emily is in Milan. What an international show today. Emily, what would you like to say?
Hey. I spoke with you a week or two ago.
Yes.
Because I had been in Abu Dhabi. So I've been following the story very closely. And I said that that people were taking this seriously in a way I hadn't seen before.
Yes.
And I believe that. Because I think that this is one of the biggest blunders that a U.S. president has had in over 40 years. But the problem is there's no one who's there to save him from himself. His whole life, there has been his dad with bailing him out of bankruptcies, Alan Weiselberg that helped, bailed his company out when it needed to, his lawyers whenever he was in legal trouble. And now there is no one to bail him out. And the problem is that he cannot back down without a win. And Iran is mocking him openly. And he can't handle that. And there's nobody there to save him from himself. And I'm very, very concerned that this is going to end in disaster.
What does disaster look like? I
feel like he's going to put boots on the ground.
And why would that be a disaster? Because of the impossibility of success?
Because they're working from a playbook that they're not prepared for. They thought that this was like bombing Iraq 20 years ago. And that's not true, because Iran has been looking at Iraq, looking at Afghanistan, and they've been preparing.
Taking notes.
So we didn't decapitate their government because they prepared and we didn't. And I said we, the U.S., they didn't prepare for this. And we're using an out-of-date playbook to deal with this situation, and we don't know, and it's not going to end well, and there are going to be mass casualties.
And of course, there's two elements to that, isn't there? Either the Iraq playbook or the Venezuela playbook, or a combination of both, but equally irrelevant in the context of what they face in Iran. And knitting together all of my calls today, the crucial, and you've returned to this point, the crucial bit of context is there is nobody in the room where it happens telling him the truth. Nobody is telling him anything he doesn't want to hear.
He's not. Even if they are, he's not listening.
But I don't think they are. I think that ship has sailed as well. I think it was true in the first term. We know that people like Fiona Hill were talking to him about Russia, and he was being told the truth about what the limits of legality would be. But now there are people in the room who won't tell him anything he doesn't want to hear. Did you see the story about the military top brass putting together footage of explosions to show him?
Yes.
Just literally showing him pictures of explosions. So everything's going great. Look, we blew some stuff up, sir.
My 6-year-old knows that that's not real.
Yeah.
We're dealing with a person that doesn't live in reality. We are.
Yes.
And so
except everybody else does. And of course, the reality that he changes or creates is a reality in which 5,000 Marines and 2,000 paratroopers are now flying or sailing to Iran, to the Gulf, to the disaster that you describe. How heavily does the memory of the Vietnam War weigh on the American public, do you think?
Oh, we've none. Sorry, unfortunately.
That's another ship that sailed, is it? Because I
pigeonholed. We don't think about
go there. Because
Vietnam War.
I was reading about it last night, and to my embarrassment, I was taken aback by how long it lasted. I don't know what I would have said if you'd asked me yesterday how long did the Vietnam War last, but I would not have said 20 years.
I didn't realize it was that long either.
I think technically from 55 to 75. And I just wonder, when we're talking about what a disaster would look like, what a disaster would be, I can't imagine future presidents carrying on with that engagement. But there are precedents for disastrous deployments from which presidents are too proud to ever resile or retreat. And Trump would be the worst of those, I imagine. Thank you, Emily. It is 11:16. You are listening to James O'Brien on LBC.
James O'Brien on LBC.
17 minutes after 11. I mean, the sharp end of the fighting in Vietnam from 65 to 73, but technically advising covers a 20-year period as well. So, you know, there is a precedent for American engagement. How long did Afghanistan last from beginning to end? Probably not far off 20 years as well. I mean, from beginning to end, 547 British service personnel that died in that conflict, the ones whose memory was insulted in the vilest fashion by Donald Trump, the man that Dick Littlejohn wants to lead this country instead of Keir Starmer, of course, who didn't just dance on the graves of dead British soldiers, but I mean, I'm not going to say it out loud, but did something worse than dancing on their metaphorical graves, claiming that their contribution had been cowardly or that they stayed away from the front line. And this is the problem, isn't it? I'm doing it already. Is that you look under a rock that's got Trump's name written on it, and there are 100 other rocks underneath. You start talking about one thing and you remember another thing. And I think that this is why I haven't landed sooner on the next bit. I haven't landed sooner on the 5,000 Marines and the 2,000 paratroopers, the 7,000 troops currently making their way to the Gulf, and the question of what that means. Carg Island is the main oil export terminal. So, I mean, I don't know enough about the oil world or the oil market to know how when you take over Carg Island, which is unlikely to happen, but is probably the plan, or one of the possible plans, and then you sort of get dominion over all the oil that is already there waiting to be exported, but you don't necessarily have any control over the ingress of future yields. Well, I mean, you just struggle to see what possible endgame there could be. Venezuela was neat, wasn't it, from their point of view? You go in, probably with the connivance of the deputy president, you remove the president, replace him with the deputy president, and just help yourself to a piece of the action. The mafia call it having a taste, don't they? You know, I want a little taste. Got a person, nice business you got there, be a shame if something happened to it. And we've probably taken our eye off that ball as well, on the fate of Venezuelan oil and the role that Donald Trump, who describes the deputy who replaced the president as the president-elect in the absence of any election. So again, another rock. You see, I looked under a rock with Trump written on it. I found 100 more rocks with Trump written on them. I looked under one of them and I remembered that he now calls the president who's been put in place by an external military coup as the president-elect, which is a phrase reserved semantically, let alone historically, for people who have won an election and are waiting for inauguration. That's what a president-elect is. She ain't won no election. Doesn't matter. Trump's decided to call her the president-elect. G7 countries meeting in Paris today. I can't help thinking that the sense of urgency and peril in that room will be rather greater than the one that we've been reflecting this week, and I think that's a mistake. I don't think the best case scenario. I think it's less likely today than it was last Friday. The best case scenario being he packs up, goes home, claims a glorious victory, and then quickly moves to a place where he pretends none of this ever happened. we all go a little bit Basil faulty, or at least Donald Trump goes a little bit Basil faulty, and just don't mention the war. And if you do mention it, just insist that I won a glorious victory and I changed the regime by putting the old bloke's son in charge, and that I improved everything by doing the things that I did. Such things, I know not what they are, but they were the terror of the earth, he might say, channeling King Lear when he was mad. Jarrett's in Salisbury. Jarrett, what made you pick up the phone?
Hi, James. Thanks for taking my call.
You're very
I've been
welcome.
resisting the urge to call you for a number of weeks now, and I finally caved this morning.
That's the spirit. Well done.
So, in answer to the boots on the ground, I don't think you'd hesitate for a minute to put them there. And at the risk of sounding like a conspiracy theorist, I think if you know, the sort of taking the angle of, it's his ego, it's distraction, he's just stupid. I think people are falling for his slight hand there. I think if you zoom out and see the bigger picture, I think there's a clear agenda.
Go on.
And I think, you know, your researcher sort of found the name of it for me, because I forgot the name of the document. I think it was Project 25 or something like that.
2025, yeah.
Yeah, if you look at the contents of that, you look at the people he surrounded himself with, the people who funded his campaign, what they're doing in terms of how they kind of align with Farage, how they talk about all of us over here in Europe, and their sort of, you know, their hatred for anything liberal and their extreme right-wing views. I think it's 100% what he's doing is he is trying to get Europe to fall in line behind America, return to the outdated right-wing.
Well, hang on. I'm just going
to
press pause. I mean, I've read much of Project 2025, and it doesn't really provide a rationale for what's happening in Iran.
Okay, so I'm trying to come to that, but I'm just sort of preempting that if I just say what I say, you'll go, oh, why have you come to that conclusion? So I'm trying to get there. So I think, you know, at the moment, Europe has been sort of pushing back and not falling in line.
A really annoying click on the line. I don't know how annoying it is for other people, but I don't know if you're doing anything. Have you got an earring in?
It might be my earring, sorry.
No, it is your earring. Keith thought I was being funny when I said that, but that is the noise of an earring hitting a phone, so go me. Sherlock Holmes in the house.
Right.
Carry on.
You're obviously very experienced in this, James.
It's not my first rodeo, Jarrett.
Yeah. So no, I think, you know, he wants Europe to fall in line, and he's been testing, pushing. He wants an East versus West divide. He wants, you know, Europe has been pushing back, and I think this goes one way. I think he wants a retaliation so severe from Iran that Europe has no choice but to fall in line. And now, if he needs to put boots on the ground to do that, he will do that. I think we're looking inevitably, you know, you asked a sort of secondary question of where does this lead. I think we're inevitably looking at, a bit like we did after the Iraq War, terrorist attacks, creating division on the streets again, creating, you know, Muslims versus Christians, all this nonsense all over again. Then people are more inclined to fight for the right-wing politicians that they want to put in to be puppets to America. If there's an agenda here going on, it's not about Iran. It's about getting what they want with Europe.
I'm glad I didn't interrupt you. I was getting ready to argue with you, and I disagree with some of the things that you've said, but that's, I mean, that you said zoom out, and that idea of creating a conflagration from which Europe won't really be able to isolate itself, and if there are terror attacks, this is, of course, suiting Vladimir Putin's purposes quite perfectly as well. So I was going to push back on that notion of an East-West divide, but you were talking about the East, I realised, in a different context from how we used to talk about it during the Cold War. And it is, so if there are terror attacks here, then the case for joining a war against Iran grows. And you know, if there's a change of personnel in Downing Street and we end up with a Trump sycophant in the chair and people who've been buying into the culture wars and the increasingly Islamophobic agenda, then they get the perpetual war that they do sometimes seem to be dreaming of.
And I think that's what it is. And again, like I said, it can, you know, I might be labelled conspiracy theorist with that, but to me,
I don't think that's a conspiracy theory. I mean, so that's why I should try it more often, not interrupting people. It's really improved the quality of your contribution. For me staying quiet.
Well, I think when you first come on, you're kind of scrabbling, sort of, you know, you're on air, you're like, well, what do I say? But you kind of take a while to come around to it. But, you know, I think it's all pointing in the same direction. And, I think
one of the things,
I don't think it's stupid.
One of the things Simon is going to be talking to us about in 20 minutes or so time is the increasing religiosity of the regime as well, and never more clearly than in this campaign. I think there's a moment where you move from Pete Hegseth essentially saying a prayer for the soldiers or claiming that they're sort of doing Christ's work, and then one of his colleagues immediately starts attacking the Iranians for being religious extremists. So you have got that. Culture war feels like an inadequate phrase to describe what we're talking about. It is like a clash of civilizations almost that they're dreaming of and hoping for. I mean, if you're right, and it does tally with much of what's in Project 2025, but if you're right, then it puts some of their current allies in the Middle East in a very strange position, not least Saudi Arabia, and also Benjamin Netanyahu's Israel would find themselves in very, very strange territory if this were to unfold. But I don't use the phrase conspiracy theory anymore, because I think anything's possible when you're dealing with levels of madness and unpredictability that we're looking at. And in some ways, what Jarrett has described has the appeal of logic. It's not just a mad bloke rushing around. I always think of showerheads when they fall out of the shower bracket and land in the bottom of the bath. If you're lucky enough to have very high water pressure, you know how a showerhead is completely uncontrollable and it bounces and dances around and everything gets wet, and you can't fix it without getting wet yourself. Even if you're super strong, you're going to have to. That's what Trump is like to me. But if the people around him are pulling his strings to a master plan to a bigger degree, it becomes almost seductive to think it's not chaos. It's not chaos. Therefore, I prefer the analysis that is not chaos, because I can analyse non-chaos. I can understand non-chaos. I can predict non-chaos. I can process non-chaos. How many times have we sat here recently and just acknowledged that when it is chaos, there's not a great deal you can do? So I don't know, but it's a theory, and it's not a conspiracy theory, it's a theory. 28 minutes after 11 is the time. You're listening to James O'Brien on LBC. I want to play you a little bit of Keir Starmer talking to Beth Rigby for her podcast called Dysfunction. And this question of, because Jarrett has just raised it, hasn't he, very powerfully, this question of escalation and possible European involvement if Iran's retaliation becomes bloodier and nastier and reaches our shores. I'm thinking more of terrorism than ballistic missiles, but what will Starmer do? I'm interested in how he is responding personally to Trump's political attacks, and it's one of the many excellent questions that Beth Rigby asked him during this very, very wide-ranging and often strangely moving interview.
I think I understand what's happening. It's to put pressure on me in different ways. But that pressure isn't going to make me waver. It's not going to make me abandon my principles or values. And that's just the way I am. That isn't new. That isn't because of President Trump. I've got core values and principles I've held all my life. And they're irreducible.
And also you stand up to bullies. You don't like being bullied, right? And you don't like seeing people bullied.
Well, look, I stand up for my principles and my values.
And what are they? To respect people and not talk down to them?
The values here are to act always in the British national interest. To be really clear, that involves not getting dragged into the war, and I'm not going to get dragged into the war. And that is the long and the short of it.
Do you think he underestimated you? Do you think he thought he could bounce you?
I don't know. I don't know. But it's obvious that, from a number of sides, there's pressure being applied. But I'm not going to buckle under pressure.
Good. It's 11:30. Dominic Ellis has your headlines.
James O'Brien on LBC.
33 minutes after 11 is the time. And another element that nobody's perfect, but you need to be aware of, that the Middle East conflict, as it stands, will damage the UK's economy more than that of any other industrialised nation, according to the latest analysis by the OECD, the Organisation for Economic Cooperation and Development. So it would see our growth forecast, and they are only forecasts, slashed from about 1.2% to about 0.7%. And it would hit us harder than other industrialised nations because, I think, of our dependency or our high usage of natural gas. I think that is why, if I've read it correctly, that's why the UK would be even more vulnerable to the shock rises or to the shock from rising oil and gas prices as a result of the US Israeli attacks on Iran. And that, of course, could weaken our jobs market further, see more contraction in business, investment, all of these things hitting all countries. I think Italy is forecast to decline faster, but not as far. Forgive me if I've not fully understood that. Turkey, Brazil and Mexico among the countries also hit hardest by the rising fuel prices at the pumps. Household incomes, business profits being hit as well, which is weird, really, because there has never been a more powerful argument when you add this to Ukraine for pursuing sustainability. But there's a growing sense that the kind of people who sold us Boris Johnson, Brexit, Liz Truss, austerity, and all the rest of it are turning net zero into the next big battle. All the same faces, all the same people, all the same politicians, all the same pockets being filled by all the same interests. And net zero is the next thing, I think. It feels like it's turning into the next front on that war between facts and very, very, very violently cultivated feelings. Because if you needed an argument for self-sufficiency in energy terms, this is Ed Miliband's great dream, as it were, a great project, great mission, self-sufficiency, sovereign self-sufficiency, so we are no longer reliant on anybody else for our energy needs. And we get it all from wind and solar and sustainable energy sources. And I will go to my grave probably struggling to understand the depth and the violence of opposition to that obvious position. It doesn't mean that it's right to do it today, or that you turn off all the oil wells, the hundreds of oil wells in the North Sea, or that it doesn't mean that you ban it immediately. But China gets it. China's playing a long game, still a massive user of fossil fuels, but the biggest producer of sustainable energy on the planet at the same time. They see which way the traffic is going. And yet there are plenty of people, and they are the same people that brought you Brexit, Boris Johnson, Liz Truss and austerity, who are desperate to keep the taps on forever, for as long as possible, presumably until it all runs out, and sod the consequences. Never mind the environment. It's all like, you can go to your Uncle Bob's Facebook page and you'll see he's absolutely certain that climate change is an absolute myth. It's all invented. And unfortunately, of course, your Uncle Bob's Facebook page now is of a piece with, and it absolutely indistinguishable from, the deeply fraudulent positions of the kind of politicians who brought you Brexit, brought you Boris Johnson, brought you Liz Truss and brought you austerity. This is nice from Stephen. You normally educate me socially, he writes, but never musically. However, that Suzanne Vega song you mentioned is an absolute belter. It's one of my all-time favourites, Stephen. I'm so glad you enjoyed it. 11:37 is the time. Simon Mark's with us in a few minutes. I mean, let's take some calls. You've heard enough from me. Nick's in Frankfurt, continuing the very international theme of the programme today. Nick, what would you like to say?
Yeah, hi, James. Well, as I've been racking my brains to think of a German word that would best describe the
There must be one.
Exactly, trying to make sense of the nonsensical,
yes.
Which I think where we are. As you rightly, well, I couldn't think of one, but anyway, it's as if we've been transported into the plot of a John Irving novel.
Yes.
If you think of the world according to Garp, now we have the world according to Trump. And we, the observers, are all Garp. And we're living in this absurd world. And, the mixture of intense absurdity, violent death and satire. I mean, there's no other way of describing it. I think we're trying to make sense of something that just will not allow itself to be made sense of. Yeah. I don't know. What do you think? I mean, you know the book. I mean, I haven't read it.
It's been a while. But I mean, well, it's like any spell, isn't it? In that you just need someone to pop the bubble. And this is what we were talking to Emily in Milan about earlier. The idea that there is nobody there to say the world is not how it is according to you. There is nobody who is going to pop the bubble, break the spell. And that's the thing that is probably hardest to grasp, because, the White House is full of people, the regime is full of people, and they are all conspiring to create a false reality. They told us they were going to do it when they started talking about alternative facts and fake news. They told us, literally told us they were going to create the world according to Trump, as opposed to the world according to the laws of gravity, physics, and international law. It's a different world. I don't know, but I mean, on the question of whether or not the troops are heading to Iran to do military things.
I mean, my initial thought was that he's just gone all in on a game of poker, and rather sort of impatiently, rather than toying with his opponents to see if he could eke out a larger, pot. He's just gone, sod this. Sorry, that's all right. And then pushes all his chips into the middle, i.e., 10,000, paratroopers.
But again,
and just trying to get the other people to capitulate. Yeah, but they're not going to because they're far too clever.
No, because if they were going to, they would have done with the threat to bomb all the energy plants or the power plants as well, which is a threat he's made, I think, 3 times now and capitulated on twice. So,
using the poker analogy, I'm not sure whether they're sitting on a pair of aces and Trump's got a couple of, I don't know, a 2 or a pair or something. But Trump, if I was playing him, I would think he's bluffing. I would just say,
he's not going to drop become the first president, I think, since George W. Bush to deploy the 82nd Airborne in hostile territory.
Yeah. Did you see the film The Apprentice, where he meets Cohen?
No.
His lawyer.
No, tell me about it.
You should, because again, you learn to see the world through Trump's eyes. Cohen taught Trump to always go on the offensive.
Yes. So
rather than just defending himself, it was attack.
Always attack.
Whoever he was up against in court, and there were numerous cases, he would attack his opponents before they even had a chance to put their case down.
Yeah, but I mean, you're in danger of
or whatever.
You're in danger of making him sound impressive because he lost. A whole heap of cases as well. I mean, it might be his tactic, but it was far from. I know you know this. I'm not correcting you. It was far from infallible. And of course, this other point that I think it was Emily who made. Was that there's always been someone else to clear up his mess. Roy Cohn being a wonderful example of that, starting with his father, bailing him out financially. This is a man who managed to lose money running a casino, which is a frankly extraordinary achievement. But there's always been somebody to clean up his mess. In the first White House, would it be John Bolton, people like that? I mean, not very necessarily nice people in the great scheme of things, but at least inhabiting the reality that everybody else recognises, whereas Trump has successfully created a completely false reality. And as I mentioned to Nick a moment ago, he told us he was going to. He told us, they all told us that he was going to. 11:42 is the time. You are listening to James O'Brien on LBC, where Paul is next. Again, staying in the UK, but hopping over the sea. He's in Belfast. Paul, what would you like to say?
How you doing, James? Nice to see you're keeping the international theme going this morning.
There we go. All human life is here, Paul. All human life is here. What would you like to say?
Look, just as an aside to my main point, I listened to Trump on your station yesterday afternoon, and I was completely and utterly exasperated. Completely and utterly exasperated. I can only make it akin to Father Ted Crowley receiving the Golden Cleric Award. That's the best. That's the best.
You're referring to the Mike Johnson moment, are you? The when he received the award that Mike Johnson's just invented, following on from I can't remember. Go on.
Just this litany of grievances, litany of lies.
Oh, you mean the press conference, the cabinet meeting?
Conference,
Conference yesterday. I mean, just
and
madness.
That's just what it reminded me of. Ted Crowley getting the Golden Cleric. That was beyond. I mean, it takes me to the further. Just a solitary American buying into what this man says. It's just exasperating. But that was the aside from what I wanted to, the point I wanted to make was about how people, specifically the Americans and the the Israelis.
Yeah.
They're obviously of the opinion we'll decapitate the Ayatollah here and the rest will fall like dominoes. That obviously hasn't happened. There's a massive, massive miscalculation on their part. And what people aren't getting is that Iran had been building up for exactly this kind of situation since the Gulf War in 2003.
Probably since the Islamic Revolution, actually. But yeah,
they've been building for this.
Yeah.
They've been building for this. And anyone who believes Trump when he says that they've completely obliterated every military aspect about Iran, they're living in a fantasy. They're living in an absolute fantasy. And I think these boys that are going to be dropped in, these 82nd Airborne, I think they're going to find out the hard way just what Iran's capable of.
Yeah, I mean, this is the worst case scenario. I was just Googling something while you were talking, because I've been using the figure of 1 million to describe the size of the Iranian army without checking actually what a previous caller said. And it's 610,000 active personnel, making it one of the largest in the entire Middle East. But there's an extra 350,000 in reserve personnel and paramilitary. So that's just shy of 1 million humans. And the argument that they've destroyed the military capability while they've still got 1 million soldiers, give or take, is just pathetic, isn't it? It's beyond laughable.
It's absolutely laughable. That people are buying this that's what's laughable. I mean, look, this is an existential threat to Iran itself.
Mm.
They're not backing down, nor will they back down.
But they can't.
They will take the show down with them. They'll take the show down.
And I guess, if we were sitting here a month ago, we might have had a conversation about there being a more amenable person in the upper echelons of the Iranian regime, but I'm not even sure that demonstrates a proper understanding of the facts, because these are theocracies. It's a religious autocracy, and the idea that there'd be the equivalent of the Venezuelan deputy president just looking for an opportunity to get rid of the headman so that they can slide into their shoes probably completely misunderstands and misrepresents the reality of Iranian life or the Iranian ruling class. Ah, man. Thank you, Paul. It is 11:46. Simon Marks is up after this.
James O'Brien on LBC.
It's 11:49. You're listening to James O'Brien on LBC. I know increasingly you're not tuning in for me. You're tuning in for the monsters I've created on this programme. Henry Riley, who will be with us in the final hour of the programme, and Simon Marks, who is with us now for his regular dispatch from DC. Shall we begin with the religion stuff? Because I've kind of teed that up for you with an earlier caller, and it's definitely you were the first person that alerted me to the direction of traffic here, and it's profoundly worrying.
Yes, it is, James, absolutely. And of course, Henry Riley and I would be nothing without you. Let's be clear about what took place yesterday in that cabinet meeting. And it's not a cabinet meeting, OK? We all keep calling this a cabinet meeting. It's not a cabinet meeting. It's a gathering of members of Trump's cabinet for a TV show. And it's the Trump show, where they are required dutifully to anoint him with ever-increasing amounts of baby oil in a bid to fluff his ego. And yesterday's was a classic of the genre. And once he finished speaking, and he went on for a very long time yesterday, I think the whole thing lasted almost 90 minutes, he turned to Vice President J.D. Vance, who, of course, paid absolute tribute to the president's unique decision to go in militarily against Iran in conjunction with the Israelis and lined up solidly behind the war, even though, of course, J.D. Vance is known to be a skeptic about this entire military operation, because he was the bloke back in the 2024 election campaign who was assuring President Trump's MAGA supporters that under no circumstance would a second Trump administration engage militarily against Iran, because it was none of America's business. It was oceans away. It was up to the country's regional allies to take care of the situation. And then he sent an astonishingly jarring message to members of the armed forces in a country, and I cannot emphasize this enough, where there is a constitutional separation between church and state. Take a listen.
They're fighting at a time where we're about to enter as Christians the most important week of the Christian calendar, the Holy Week that celebrates the return of Jesus Christ to Jerusalem. And so I want to say to all of my fellow American Christians, but particularly those serving in the Gulf, that I wish you all a very blessed Easter, a very blessed Holy Week, and we continue to stand behind you and continue to support you every step of the way.
Now, we've already discussed on the programme some of the evangelical Christian messaging, the Christian nationalist messaging that has been coming out of not only the White House but also the Pentagon, where, of course, Pete Hegseth, the self-styled Secretary of War, holds a weekly Bible meeting. And in fact, this week's was actually shown on video for members of the public to observe. But seconds after Vice President J.D. Vance there pierced the constitutional separation of church and state, and we've seen hundreds of troops in the Middle East complaining to an NGO here that monitors the religious freedom of soldiers. They claim they've been given, these Christian nationalist orders by their commanding officers. And of course, the armed forces here are not uniquely Christian. There are people serving from all faiths in the armed forces. But then seconds after Vice President J.D. Vance said what he had to say there about sending Easter blessings to Christians serving in the armed forces, Marco Rubio then laid it on with a trowel in terms of his description of the Iranians.
People like this, and now what I'm talking about is not the people of Iran. The people that run this country are radical Shia clerics. These are religious fanatics.
I mean, the notion that we are couching this in those terms, of course one can argue that the Shia clerics who run Iran are indeed religious fanatics, but the comparison and contrast of those comments with what Vance had said just moments earlier once again underscored that in the minds of many of the people prosecuting this war from the United States side, there is a real religious zeal that is driving a lot of this.
I mean, there's an earlier caller cited Project 2025, which we haven't talked about for a while. This ethno-nationalist Christian right, all four of those words are relevant here, aren't they? All four constituent parts of that description. And the Christianity bit is creeping up on the outside lane at the moment, it feels.
Yes, absolutely. If you look at the people that were sitting around the table there yesterday, they included Russell Vogt, who's the head of the Office of Management and Budget, and who absolutely is one of the leading lights and was not only in Project 2025, but also in the Christian nationalist movement that aims, and there's no question about what the ultimate aim is here, they want this country not only to move closer to God politically, they really want it to be a theocracy. They reject the notion of the constitutional separation between church and state, which is why so much of the messaging regarding this conflict is not only alarming because it appears designed really to goad people, not just the Shia clerics in Iran, but people who follow the Muslim faith all over the world. I mean, to portray this as they have done since February the 28th when the conflict was launched as something of a crusade, and that, of course, was a term that George W. Bush used when he sent troops to Iraq back in 2003, and we hadn't really twigged to the rise of this Christian nationalism ethos. But to be portraying it in those terms is a very clear indicator of where they want to take this country. Never mind the way in which they view the battle against Iran's government.
And of course, it can also sail perilously close and often right into anti-Semitism as well. But you're right to focus for the time being on the posturing that it represents with regards to Islamic countries, even though, of course, the divisions between Shia and Sunni make that generic phrase a little bit unhelpful in the context of a civilizational clash or something like that. We've been talking, and you won't have been up long enough to listen, but we've been talking about the deployment of the 82nd Airborne and the 5,000 Marines who are making their way there. What's the feeling in America, or what is the reporting in America with regard to the likelihood of them actually parachuting onto Carg Island or similar?
Well, I can tell you what the feeling is on Capitol Hill among some Republicans who emerged from a classified briefing earlier in the week and said, as members of Congress had said a couple of weeks back, that they were increasingly concerned that President Trump is planning some kind of ground deployment of forces. I mean, you wouldn't really be sending the 82nd Airborne if you weren't planning to instruct them to engage in some kind of ground invasion, unless you simply were trying to put psychological pressure on the Iranians to forge the peace deal that one day you say you're truly interested in achieving, but then 24 hours later you say you're not even sure you're willing anymore to go forward with it, as the president said yesterday. I mean, there are two potential military operations here, both of them deeply hazardous, and neither of which the American public has been prepared for by the White House. One is what could be a military opportunity to try and take control of Karg Island, which would involve paratroops and others taking up positions on that island, which is the major port where 90% of Iran's oil is loaded onto tankers that then sail through the Strait of Hormuz. It is considered the economic backbone, together with the Strait of Hormuz, of the country. So it's a very tempting target, but we already know the Iranians are strengthening and reinforcing their defences there, and there is no military analyst here that thinks you could engage in a ground operation in Karg Island that does not result in a significant number of American casualties. The other option that they may go after is using ground forces to try and recover Iran's stockpile of enriched uranium that we always must remind people is the very same stockpile of enriched uranium that President Trump claims he completely obliterated and destroyed last summer. That is now said to be dispersed around the country, even though at the time of Operation Midnight Hammer, the president insisted the Iranians had not been able in any fashion to squirrel their enriched uranium away, and it had all been taken care of by the military operation. Now, suddenly, there's the possibility of ground troops engaging in an effort to recover that. Again, very, very hazardous, and, you know, no chance of either of those operations happening without at least casualties and possibly American fatalities.
Oh boy. I suppose my final question is the best case scenario that I conjured up somewhat half-heartedly of him just packing up, going home, pretending that he's secured a massive victory and hoping that no one ever mentions it again. That seems to be fading. The odds on that are getting longer and longer.
I think it depends entirely on the day.
Yeah.
And if you look at what happened yesterday, there was a real clue to what influences his thinking. There was a lot of bravado in that cabinet meeting. As he said, he's not even sure he's willing anymore to strike a deal with the Iranians, and spoke about even if there is a deal, they've got a long list of targets they still want to strike before all of this is over. And then, as the clock ticked to 4 o'clock in the afternoon here, and the moment at which the financial markets up in New York were going to close for the day, in the minutes leading up to the close of the market, suddenly we got this Truth Social posting saying, I've decided to kick military action against the Iranian power plants down the road for another 10 days. Talks are going very well. We're going to give them more of an opportunity. I'm not going to bomb the electricity and energy plants until at least April the 6th now. And the second at which that flashed up on my phone, then, right off the back, there was the New York Times flash saying the markets had closed and the S&P had suffered its biggest fall since the war began. And, of course, oil had risen above $108 a barrel. So there's a direct connection between these two things. And the Iranians, therefore, know that the more they can control the Strait of Hormuz, the more they can unleash deep anxiety and uncertainty on the world's financial markets and in the homes of Americans all over the country who this Friday are figuring out how they're going to fill the car with petrol or fill, the trolley at the supermarket with what they need for the next week. The Iranians know the more they can control that narrative, the more President Trump is constrained in what he ends up doing here.
Simon, as ever, absolutely first-class analysis. Thank you. I'm going to go out on a limb and predict that we'll speak next week. In the meantime, do have a wonderful weekend. It is 1 minute after 12. I'm saying that to Simon, not to you. We've got another hour. Don't you be going anywhere.
James O'Brien on LBC.
5 minutes after 12 is the time. I haven't got the psychic energy, if that's the correct word to use, to do that conversation I suggested to you at 10 o'clock today about adoption. We must do it one day. But as an adopted person, I don't know that I could hold myself together if we were having discussions about babies being given up by reluctant mothers. If you missed Anne Keen's contribution to Nick Ferrari's show earlier today, then I really would urge you to revisit it. Incredibly powerful and incredibly moving. But I feel the need for speed. No, sorry, I feel the need for something a little lighter this hour, and I love this story, and I don't know that I'm going to do it full justice, because you almost have to read the interview that a pub landlord called Egil Johansson has given to the Guardian newspaper today, the inimitable the landlord of online repute, shall we say. He has banned children from his pub, and this is not a publicity stunt. That's what I mean by worrying that I'm not going to do justice to it. If you read the interview, you realise this is a really authentic and deeply held conviction. It's a good way to get your face in the paper. I'm banning children from it. So it's a bit like the pathetic pub landlords who are putting up stickers saying Labour MPs not allowed in my pub, while simultaneously complaining that their business is struggling. This is not like that. This is very, very genuine. And what comes across from the interview is that he has really struggled with the decision to ban children from his pub. He talks about the time I mean, we shouldn't laugh. Everyone, as far as I'm aware, is fine. He talks about the time a 3-year-old fell down the cellar hatch because the parents of the 3-year-old were simply not doing any parenting whatsoever. And the 5-year-old who careered into a member of staff who was carrying a big tray of drinks, sending the whole thing flying. And crucially, and this is why I think the conversation is a lot more nuanced than some of the online debate allows. Crucially, he talks about the failure of parents to look after their own children. So this is not about hating children. In fact, the ban might be on children, but what he's really seeking to do is keep parents who don't look after their own children out of the pub. Now, one of the reasons I find this so interesting is because of my own age and the certainty that 15 years ago, shall we say, I would have found this obnoxious and I'd have taken it very personally. I would have railed against the landlord of the Kenton Arms in Hackney in East London, and I would have described him as akin to the child catcher in Chitty Chitty Bang Bang or something like that. And I'd have meant it. I could almost feel the old me, pre-therapy me, reaching for entirely inappropriate insults and performative unpleasantness and going after this fella like a rat up a drainpipe. And I would have meant it. I remember on one occasion when my oldest was mithering. She was, what's the word that I want? I don't know whether she was teething. She wouldn't have been teething. She was a bit older than that. But she was mithering. A northern term, just playing up. And somebody complained. We were in a restaurant in Norfolk. And it was a pub lunchtime. And she wasn't running around or misbehaving. She was just crying. And someone asked us to take her outside, and I was disgusted. How dare you? I'm calming. I mean, it never took us more than a couple of minutes to calm her down. But, you know, that kind of... I always think of certain people, dare I say women of a certain... No, I won't say that. But certain people having a face slightly... a bit like... I always think a bit like a cat's bottom. You know, with the... very pinched, sort of like a cat's bum, faces like that. So, well, can't you control your children? And you're like, well, we are controlling our children. This isn't... You might want to watch that one back on YouTube, by the way. I just did the cat's bum. I also, if you are watching this on YouTube, or if you're thinking about watching it on YouTube later, if you were to go to... Was it about 10:45? There was quite an amusing episode in the studio where I thought that my overnight oats were about to explode. So I'm sitting here talking to you, and I hear a strange fizzing noise to my right, and there's nobody there. And I don't know if you were listening a couple of days ago when I handed over to Sheila and her microphone went a bit funny. So I thought, oh, Lordy, there's something technological going on. So I'm gesticulating to Keith in a very histrionic fashion. There's something going on wrong in the studio, and Keith is looking at me with a characteristic blankness, and I'm trying to convey the fact that something is making a very strange noise to my right, and I'm looking over there and it's fizzing, and what's that noise? And I realise, and I just think, oh my days I didn't put my rolled oats, I didn't put my overnight oats in the fridge until quite late yesterday. I've got yesterday's oats with me, and perhaps they're ferment, and I checked the top of it and I took the lid off and it was fizzing. It was beginning to unscrew. Such was the pressure building up in my thermos flask. I got a very nice little thermos flask. You'll see it if you watch it on YouTube. And the pressure underneath was actually beginning to undo the lid. So that was the noise I could hear. So I'm sitting here thinking, well, I can't leave the studio. I've got to keep talking. But that could explode at any moment. And it's built like a bomb. You know what those little metal flasks are like? What if it actually explodes? I don't get paid for that kind of exposure. Are we even insured? Keith gets very, very worried, not about me, about the equipment when things like that and things get spilt. So if you watched back about 10:45, about 10:50 to 11 o'clock today, then I'm sure it would be amusing, at least on some level. It's a resting Brexit face. I quite like that from Mike. So I would have got cross about this back in the day, and I would have said, this is outrageous, what a killjoy, what a miserable old git, I'm never going anywhere near your pub. But this interview he's given is really powerful. In every case, he says, the parents blame us when something goes wrong, or they get really angry when we ask them to control their children. He's been running the pub for 17 years. He tried a ban on children after 5 p.m, but it hasn't worked. People carry on bringing in children on one occasion, all high on sugar and excitement, straight from a birthday party, and then the parents just completely ignored them as they ran around the pub as if it was some sort of adventure playground. My words, not his. He has now banned children entirely, saying, I'm legally obliged to keep children safe on my premises, and if the parents let their children run riot, the only answer is not to allow them in at all. And the crucial distinction here is the parents who don't look after their children. So we get distinguished, we get discriminated against because of the behaviour of other parents. Those of us who would always keep quite a close eye on our children or recognise, because if you've ever worked in hospitality, you know what it's like to have children scurrying around under your feet, and you would be absolutely adamant that your own children are not going to be joining that band of behaviour. So you know that this is quite a far-reaching punishment, but I put it to you that he's right. He's right. I think I approve of this, and for the avoidance of doubt, I really like children. My enjoyment of a social occasion is generally massively enhanced by the presence of children. I generally prefer mucking about with the children than I do to talking to their parents sometimes. But I just think that this description of parents who aren't looking after their own children, so the children aren't really doing anything wrong. It's not the children that are being penalised here. Or punished. It's the parents who do not do their basic parental duties. And that's what we're going to talk about today. Treating a pub as if it's a sort of soft play gym, and the difficulties that you have as a landlord or as someone working in a pub of doing this. So, obviously the magic here is going to be in the why, not the what. But we begin with the what, which is very simply, whose side are you on? Are you on the side of the landlord or the side of the angry parents? 0345 6060 973. But the important bit is, of course, in the why of it. Why have you picked that side? Why do you think that a pub should actually accommodate your children, regardless of how they behave? Or crucially, why do you approve of this? What is the experience you've had? Not of obnoxious children. I think that is probably an unfair depiction, and also, you know, it's a bit unkind actually to start talking about obnoxious children. It's obnoxious parents, and particularly parents perhaps who don't realise how obnoxious they are, because they get to the pub and they somehow seem to think that their child-caring duties are on hold until they leave the pub again. You've seen it, haven't you? You've been in a pub where, you know, everyone... Do you know what else is a key part? Oh, God, it's been so long since I was in this world. Parents think it's charming. Parents think it's charming, that the behaviour. You know, so it comes along and lifts a roast potato off your Sunday lunch plate, and mum and dad are going, oh, he's so cute, he loves potatoes. And you're going, that's my chuffing potato, give it back now, you little so-and-so. The idea that parents think the behaviour is completely charming. Oh, look, he's running around. He's very fast, isn't he? And you're sitting there, particularly if you haven't got children and you've never had them, so you're young, or I don't know whether you're more sympathetic or less sympathetic if you've had your own and they're now no longer with you in the pub. I think you're probably more sympathetic, are you? I don't know, we're about to find out. But this combination of an indulgent parent who thinks it's cute that their kid... Imagine if an adult came over and tripped up a waiter or something like that. Imagine if an adult sort of stuck its finger in your sticky toffee pudding. Or imagine if an adult was sort of shouting their head off or pushing you out of the way or running around as if it were... Imagine a fully grown adult running around a pub as if it were a soft play gym. And if the parents won't do it, then why the heck should landlords put up with it? This guy here, I really like this guy. Stephen Boyd from, I know this pub. It's a lovely pub, the Alma in Wandsworth. Have you ever been to the Alma in Wandsworth? He took over the pub and wanted to attract young families. And now says he didn't realise what he was getting into. So the families with children would come in, they'd take up a disproportionate amount of time, and obviously there's not much profit on the kids' food anyway. They'd want detailed discussions about ingredients, different meals. They weren't being unreasonable, but there was just so much of it. He says, can you dilute the drink? Can you heat it up but not too hot? Can we have a baby chino? Can you take out the mushrooms? Do you do it without onions? Don't put too much salt in it. And the adult customers who are paying full price for more profitable meals are sitting there waiting to place their order. I love this guy. And I'm not just saying that so that I get a free pint next time I'm in Wandsworth. This guy says you just need a couple of screaming, banging on a table or running up and down and it dictates the whole atmosphere of the pub. Parents would take massive umbrage if staff asked them to stop their children doing something, so he banned them. And another reason why I like him is his rather Anglo-Saxon language. He says it was a effing revelation. All the stress just disappeared overnight. Staff retention is up. Takings have doubled since he banned children from his pub. And he wishes he'd done it sooner. I got a lot of online hate, mainly from people who had never been to the pub. God save us from... I get a lot of online hate from people who've never listened to my radio programme, so I know exactly how he feels. But I felt I was doing something morally They felt I was doing something morally hateful. And I don't agree. I think he is a genius. And if I had young children, possibly I would adopt a slightly different argument, but I would... I doubt it, frankly. I would grow out of it. I have grown out of it, and that's why I'm on the side of the landlords. Whose side are you on? The landlords who ban children or the parents who complain and think it's some sort of moral outrage? And crucially, why? If you've got a story that tops and no one was hurt, the 3-year-old was fine, but a 3-year-old runs around behind the bar of a pub and disappears like Del Boy down a hole into the cellar. I mean, at that point... Also, you're going to get into... If the kid got hurt, who's going to get sued? And no doubt they'd find, well, the hatch should have been shut. It's unsafe. And you'd be like, well, the kid shouldn't have been behind the bar. And the parents would be like, it's outrageous. Our little boy has become injured by falling through a hole in the pub floor. Where was he? He was behind the bar. What was he doing behind the bar? He's just so curious. He's such a curious little treasure. He's so curious and adventurous. He's behind the bar and he fell down a hole. This is your fault. You're banned. You're banned. If I was a landlord, I'd probably, and this is why I wouldn't be a very good landlord, although it is in my DNA, I would actually ban on individual bases. So I wouldn't ban all children. I'd wait until some parents came in whose children were behaving badly and I'd just chuck them out. Get out of my pub. So the kids come behind the bar. It's nearly fallen down the hatch. Sorry, you're barred. Get out. Out now. You can stay. Your kids are all right. You can't stay. You can't control them. I'd be a little bit... And that wouldn't be very good, really, because it's too mercurial and inconsistent and all the rest of it. But whose side are you on and why? If you're a landlord, I'd love to hear from you on this one, because I imagine it's quite tempting, but I mean, I've really got a vision of a pub landlord now as a character in a Hanna-Barbera or a Warner Brothers cartoon, with an angel on one shoulder and a devil on the other. And I don't know which one is saying what. Is the angel saying, you're going to have to ban the children, it's only fair, it's in the interest of your staff, and the devil is going, no, keep them here, the little... Or is the imp on your right shoulder saying, you've got to ban the kids, stuff the parents, and the angel is saying, hey, come on, man, they're children. Hey, you can't discriminate against... If you're a landlord, I reckon this is a real dilemma. If you want me to decide what you should do on your behalf, I'm available until 1 o'clock. The time now is 12:20.
James O'Brien on LBC.
22 minutes after 12. This is possibly my favourite text of the week, and there's been quite a lot of competition this week. I've received some brilliant messages, but this is from Kevin. If you're just tuning in, we're talking about landlords that have banned children from pubs, and there's a rather splendid pub in Wandsworth called the Alma, whose landlord Stephen Boyd has given a brilliant interview to The Guardian, prompted by the decision of a landlord over in Hackney at the Kenton, who's kind of gone a bit viral on social media for implementing a ban. But I love this from Kevin. He says, my mate lives in Wandsworth. I can almost guarantee that it's his kids who tipped the landlord of the Alma over the edge. And that, of course, opens up the door to whether or not parents realise how obnoxious their behaviour is, not their children's behaviour. Whether or not parents realise how outrageous it is to expect bar staff or pub landlords to double up as crash managers or childcare assistants. So whose side are you on and why? Alex is in Tunbridge Wells. Alex, what made you pick up the phone?
Morning, James.
Hello.
I'm a landlord of a pub in Tunbridge Wells, but we do take kids up till 7 p.m, but you do find the parents just absolutely switch off once they've got their drinks.
Yeah.
And, you were saying earlier about, bring them in full of sugar and what have you. I'll tell you, the worst one we had, a football team came in, so all 13-year-olds with their parents. They just won a tournament. They all sit down at a massive table in the garden.
Yeah.
And then one of my regulars came in and said, he just arrived at the back door, came in the back door and said to me, there's some kids on your roof. I said, beg your pardon? The football kids had left their parents outside, gone inside, gone upstairs. There's a door onto the flat roof. They found the key for it, opened the door, and they're up on the flat roof outside.
Holy moly.
And I'm...
What did you do? What did you do?
Well, I lost my F, as they say. But
Yeah.
I did...
Who at? At the kids? You screamed at the kids. So they're 13, 14. They're well old enough to know better.
Oh, 100%. And some of them were in my stockroom as well.
What?
I was in there. Yeah, and so I went outside, and I'm really quite lost in my parents.
I'd have chucked them
I'm
out.
quite a calm guy, but
Yeah,
you
clearly. You have to
it's dangerous. It really is.
So what did you do? Did you tell them to get their kids under control?
Yeah, I'd asked them to leave.
You did? You chucked them all out?
Yeah, I did chuck
Keith,
them out. Yeah,
come on,
they
mate,
did
on your
apologise.
toes.
The parents, they did apologise on the way out. The parents.
Well done. And so that's the only way. It's the only language they understand, mate. I mean, your children are on the roof, and they haven't got up to bring them down.
Yeah, they were literally looking over them. They must have seen them.
Just unbelievable. What, if you could, and I appreciate that you haven't, but I suspect you might quite like to, what age would be... Because I was going to say, by the time they're 13 or 14, they can behave themselves. I mean, also, by the time they're 13 or 14, you kind of don't think that they need parental supervision, although these little scroats clearly did. What age would you do if you were going to do a ban?
I think that... I think because it's kind of, you got to do it all or nothing, really.
Yeah.
We don't do food.
So under 16s?
Well, under 18s. Really.
Under 18s, yeah, if you don't do food.
Yeah. We don't do food. But the thing is, I'm torn. We're quite a nice community pub with a really nice community feel. We get, it's the dogs and kids that sometimes dogs go for each other as well, and I don't really like that. But you can't really not, and especially in this climate, it's very, very tough turning people away who are going to spend money. So.
Yeah, I guess it is in the current climate, although this bloke in Wandsworth says his takings have doubled since he banned the children. And I mean, if you're busy, it would do, wouldn't it? Because they're taking up loads and loads of space and they're not spending that much money.
Well, no, that's it. I mean, you're selling a few sort of Cokes and stuff, but it's more what the parents...
Can we do a tiny bit of role play? Would you mind?
Okay.
I'm the parent. The kids are up on the roof. And you come outside to chuck me out. Just do it. I'll be the parent. Yeah, hello, mate. Everything all right?
Can you get your insert word here, kids, off my insert word here roof, please?
Is that what you did?
Yeah, and can you please leave the premises?
And did they push back at all? Did you get any pushback?
No, they looked shocked.
Good.
They looked shocked.
Good for you. Good for you, but you can't do the ban. You would if you could, but you can't. I'm putting you down now.
I don't feel I can.
No,
but we do. We are quite. And then, like I think you were saying earlier, if you do have a go at the parents, they sort of take umbrage at. They think, they think, well, not my kid, surely not. And why are you having a go at me? And blah, blah, blah.
But we do. I mean, this is what I remember. Even if the child was misbehaving, you'd somehow feel it was an affront, or you were questioning my parenting skills. But I am questioning your parenting skills. They're on the roof. It's unbelievable.
I'll tell you, just talking to the customers, half the customers are like, you should not have kids in the pub.
Yeah.
Of course, all the family ones are like, why can't kids go in the pub? It should be a family atmosphere.
Yeah. Well, I'm leaning towards Group 1, actually, even as obviously wouldn't have done when my kids were younger, but that's the decisions you have to make. Do you want to mention the pub, Alex? I can fully understand if you don't.
It's the Tiger Tavern.
Get yourself down the Tiger Tavern. Right, get yourself down the Tiger Tavern, all right? Stay off the bloody roof. Take care, Alex. Have a good day. The Tiger Tavern sounds nice. Rochelle's in Polegate. Rochelle, what do you reckon?
Hello, James. Firstly, I'd like to thank you for your show. I really enjoy it.
I do get paid. I do get paid for it. I don't do it for love,
So
but
you should.
I should. But I appreciate your kind words, Rochelle. What would you like to say?
I'm the opposite. My children are a lot older now, and going to the pub with the children, and I had 4, was sort of like an afternoon out, and they'd sit there with their bag of crisps and their lemonade with a straw.
Yeah.
I was one of those mums who they knew better not, don't you behave yourself. But I do understand the pub landlords and how hard and difficult it is for them. It's a business. And the waitresses that are running around, dodging the children. I do understand that. But you certainly did make me giggle, and the memories just came flooding in.
and you were one of the good guys. Your children wouldn't be seen dead up on a roof.
No.
Or falling down a hatch behind the bar, like Del Boy.
I don't know about that one. I could imagine them running around there just to see what's going on.
Yeah, you're barred then, Rochelle. Seriously, you can't. The children should be if they stray out. I'm drawing an invisible circle around the table where they're sitting.
But may I say, James,
you may.
Can we just reflect on the fact that even with ourselves, if we were lucky enough to go with our mum and dad, they didn't have a lot of money back in the day. I'm nearly 60 now. And it was a massive treat. It was a massive treat. You felt, included. It was lovely. It was a lovely atmosphere.
Lovely. You're absolutely right.
Especially if they had a band, a live little band going on. You was just like, wow, especially at Christmas and things like that. So, yes, I do feel for the landlords, 100%. But I also want to remind everybody, how fun it was as a child going to the pub.
Behaving. Well, yeah, it was the Fountain Inn for me in Low Haberley, just around the corner from where I grew up. But it's flats now. It's not even a pub anymore. I even had a Skittle Alley. Can you believe it? That's how old I am. I had a Skittle Alley, Keith, the local pub. In fact, it was a beautiful pub. And it was a real treat. And also, when you reach the age, possibly not quite the legal age, but when you go for a pint with your dad, when you reach the age where you go for a pint with your dad, it's very special moments. But I don't know that there is much debate here, actually. I mean, I can tell you what we're missing, apart from Rochelle's fond memories. What's the upside of having children in a pub? I'm not doing the dogs, all right? A lot of people are getting in touch about dogs. Wayne in Basildon doesn't like having dogs in the pub. This one, I thought for a minute that this might be borderline trolling from Tomo. He says, ban dogs from pubs, mate. A couple of weeks back, we were in the Black Lion in Chiswick, and a little yappy dog spoilt our drinks. We had planned on having some food, but left after 1 pint. The bar staff were handing the little rat treats. And I mean, again, I'm a dog owner now, but I'm pretty sure 20 years ago I'd have been with Tomo on this. The reason why I thought it might be trolling was because it's a pub I have been known to frequent in the past, and I do have a little dog, and it can be quite yappy, although not in pubs. It's probably all the whiskey we give it. 12:30. I'm joking. Don't phone the RSPCA. Tim Humphrey has your headlines.
James O'Brien on LBC.
I'm losing my marbles, or I mean, it used to be very rare to have children in. We weren't really allowed in pubs. I remember Rochelle, what she said. Sometimes you go for Sunday lunch, perhaps, or something like that. But you wouldn't go. I mean, you weren't allowed. I'm pretty sure we used to. Did we not sit in the car with a bottle of Vimto and a bag of crisps? I think we did. Or you'd have to tell the landlady that you were definitely going to behave. Anyway, we'll get back to that if there's time, because Henry Riley is here. What's going on, Henry?
A couple of stories just to tell you about, James. First story we're reporting on is Corey Edwards, who is a Reform candidate in Wales, and he's been backed today by Nigel Farage. He's been in the headlines, you may have seen in other outlets, because he has been pictured doing a Nazi salute.
Oh.
Nigel Farage has stood by him. He's a candidate in the May Senedd election. There's a photograph appearing to show him online performing a Nazi salute.
Is it inarguable?
Yes, it is inarguable, but what he's doing is inarguable, but he has a justification, a reason.
Because someone once tried to claim I was doing a Nazi salute because I was waving at Keith, and they clipped it up and stuck it on social media and claimed that but so this is that no one is disputing that is what was actually happening.
Well, and he has said, Corey Edwards, a photo from many years ago has been shared that I recognise looks bad and could be misinterpreted. There is a clear distinction between ordinary use of the appalling gesture compared with me imitating a Welsh footballer's use of it, or Basil Fawlty's walk. So Wayne Hennessy, the former goalkeeper, got in trouble because there was a picture that purported to show him doing a Nazi salute some years back, or indeed this candidate is referencing Basil Fawlty's walk. Reform have said, we're not willing to write off people forever because of mistakes they made when they were young, and this was Nigel Farage.
Well, they can't, can they?
Well, this was Nigel Farage speaking with ITV's Harry Horton yesterday.
It was a Fawlty Towers impression. Again, maybe we should ban the BBC. I don't know.
Is that what it was? Is that
the context I've been told? It was taking a Basil Fawlty sketch, and that's why he did it.
So he's not being kicked out. He will remain a candidate.
No, he's a human being. He's a human being.
And he'll remain a Reform Party candidate.
Oh, gosh. I don't know what you want us to be. I mean, we're sort of bunch of nobodies who've never said or done anything silly or funny. Basil Fawlty, most people think, is quite funny.
OK, let me just ask you about James...
And by the way, I get the point. It looks terrible. Yeah. Things in isolation often do. Wouldn't approve of it. No, I get that, all right? But just remember, on the same day, Plaid have kicked a candidate out for something far more serious.
Don't they need to get their story straight? I mean, the bloke saying he was doing an impression of a footballer, and Farage saying he told me he was doing an impression of Basil Fawlty.
Yeah, well, he does reference Basil Fawlty in his statement, the candidate, but you're right. He's
talking about Basil Fawlty's walk.
Basil Fawlty's walk, yes. But
it's very unfortunate.
You're right. I mean, you could sort of read into that. I have to mention, because he mentioned Plaid.
Yes, of course. What was that about?
That is Neil Roberts, who was standing for Plaid. He's now been dropped as a candidate because he posted something I can't actually say on the radio, but in 2021 that's now been brought up, and he has apologised, and he is now no longer a candidate. He's been dropped as a candidate.
So he has been sacked as a candidate for
the
past misdemeanours.
Yes, this Plaid Cymru candidate has been sacked.
And why did he keep saying he's a human being? Was there some dispute about that?
No, there's
confusion.
Malcolm Moffat and Nigel Farage. We'll come on to Malcolm Moffat in a second. He's the leader in Scotland. But they are trying to illustrate a point that people have said things and done things when they were not in politics. Right. That's their argument.
Okay.
Speaking of Malcolm Moffat, another story that's hit the headlines. This is Malcolm Moffat has denied homophobia this morning after apologising for a joke. A bit like the Plaid story I touched on there. I can't actually tell you what the joke was, but it's in relation to George Michael and Fadi Fawaz, who of course was George Michael's partner when the singer died in 2016. We've been hearing today from both Nigel Farage and Malcolm Moffat about this. So in essence, there was a speech that Malcolm Moffat made before he was Lord Offord, the Conservative peer, at the London Scottish Rugby Club in 2018. He was the chairman. It was then brought up. I mean, Ian Lewer, who was at the speech, told the Record in Scotland, at the time, I thought it was pretty awful.
At a rugby club dinner, blimey, it must be absolutely hideous.
He said, I thought it was pretty awful, and indeed that was the feeling in the room. I don't know who in their right mind would say something like that. He added, it's utterly bizarre that anyone would get up and make a speech in a room with 200 people and say something like that. It was so shocking, I've not forgotten it. Of course, I can't tell you, as I say, what the joke, sort of in inverted commas, was, but Nigel Farage has said this.
If we're going to drum people out of public life for telling a joke at a boozy rugby club dinner that's amongst friends, we'll finish up with the dullest group of individuals sounding a bit like Keir Starmer. When you take something as it is, yeah, of course it looks awful, but the context in which it was said, and I understand even on the evening, he probably regretted doing it.
And we've heard also from Malcolm Moffat.
I've just read the joke. It's absolutely gross, although it's not as disgusting as the homophobic joke that Nigel Farage did at his brother's wedding a few years ago. So no wonder Farage is saying what he's saying.
Malcolm Moffat has spoken about this today. He spoke with Radio Scotland.
I made a distasteful joke, which I regretted.
Was it homophobic?
It wasn't even a very funny joke.
But why did you make it then?
Well, it was an error of judgment, and sometimes one does that, and particularly when you're a private individual. Obviously, when one is in public office, it's a higher standard, and we're all learning on the way.
And that was Malcolm Offord speaking with Radio Scotland. Also to point out, he has said he instantly regretted the remarks and did donate to an LGBT organisation.
I mean, it's just gross what he said. I mean, inexplicably gross as well. It's Farage, of course, can't really fire people for making homophobic jokes because he's made them himself, or indeed for doing Hitler stuff, because his former school contemporaries at Dulwich College say that he was absolutely doing it all the time. And this may seem like a bit of an exercise in hair splitting, but I don't think Basil Fawlty did a Hitler salute. He did a goose step, and he put his finger under his nose to ape the moustache, Hitler's facial hair. But I don't think he actually did a Hitler salute, did he?
I'm a big fan of Fawlty Towers.
Yeah, I am as well.
Yeah, it's 50 years ago last year, so I was doing a piece on it for LBC, and I have to be honest, I don't recall in the Germans episode that, but I do recall the goose step, as you say, and the sort of finger mimicking a moustache.
Oh, well, thank you, Henry.
Thank you.
The weekend is almost upon us. It would have been a shame not to see you before it began to unfold. What are you doing? Are you on air over the weekend?
Both days.
Quite a lot of shifts lately.
Yeah.
Are you okay? Are you getting enough sleep? I worry about you.
Yeah, do you?
Yeah, I do worry about
I can tell.
I mean, I was the future once.
Yeah.
And I'd say yes to everything. I'd do every shift going, and it takes a toll.
Well, people have got to book out in their diaries 3 till 6 in the afternoon, Saturday and Sunday.
Saturday and Sunday, the Henry Riley Show.
It's where the magic happens.
It's where the magic happens. 12:41 is the Times, and seriously, that is highly recommended by me. So do go and check it out. I've got a Basil Fawlty impersonator in my inbox who endorses our memory of the memory. Back to the pubs, and indeed the question of whether we side with the landlords who are banning them. What happened in 2015? The landlord of the Kenton Arms in Hackney. Are you now more likely to go there, now that you know that you won't have your fun spoiled by careering children running around the place, by misbehaving children who are entirely the fault of their parents, by the way? Kids are kids. You can't really blame kids for being kids. But the parents who somehow don't think it's their job to look after them, are you now more likely? Are you making a note of the pubs? You're making a note of the Alma in Wandsworth and the Kenton Arms in Hackney, and you're thinking, I'm more likely to go there now. The Nag's Head in Walthamstow has a child-free policy. There's a few more. The numbers are growing. I think I don't know. I mean, it depends what time of day it is. 12:42 is the time. Nico is in Appledore. Nico, what would you like to say?
Yes, hi. I'd like to point out the difference between the behaviour of children abroad and the behaviour of the children in the UK. Now, I've worked in pubs in London for the past 20 years, and my family have run a hotel restaurant in the south of France for the past 30 years.
Oh, lovely.
And I can tell you that in France, in 30 years, never do you ever see the French kids or Spanish kids or Italian kids behaving like the English kids do.
What about the Germans?
Well, funny enough, I'm actually half German, so.
But the German kids misbehave.
So, I mean, I can't speak for myself when I was a kid because I was a half German kid, so I had to ask my late father about that.
Yeah.
But I mean, it's really, really stark. I mean, the kids are out of control when in London, and I think it's because the parents seem to absolve all responsibility
when they come through the door. It's so bizarre. I recognise what you describe. Actually, I mean, we may be generalising, but you don't. I mean, you don't think of. First of all, they're constantly welcome, aren't they? In like tables of restaurants, children are always there. It's not a London phenomenon. What we're talking about, then, it extends beyond London.
It does. I mean, I think that it's stark, particularly stark in France, when they've been in France and working down there, is that the moment a group of English turn up with their kids, that it's chaos. It's absolute chaos, and you just don't see it.
Why is it, do you think?
I think because I don't think they interact with their children. I think there is also that word that I don't really want to use because it has connotations, but the idea
is it Bernard Manning?
Being frightened of discipline.
Discipline.
and just saying, I remember one time these kids were running absolute havoc in the pub, and in the end I just sort of grabbed this kid and I went,
whoa, you can't be doing that, Nico.
I know, it was really bad.
Yeah.
But I just said, look, sit down, be a good boy. Your parents have brought you out for a nice lunch. Now sit there like a good boy and behave, and everyone can have a nice time. And he did it immediately.
So they just went
and sat down. So, I'd never do that again. Honestly, it was a big mistake.
Yeah, good. And that's not political correctness. You can't touch other people's children.
No, absolutely.
Unless he was falling through a hatch behind the bar and you caught him by the ears.
He was about to tear into the kitchen.
No, okay. Well, then you can. I think you can physically kind of. You can't. It's true. But you shouldn't have to worry about this because you're a blooming restaurateur or a landlord. You're not a childcare professional.
Yeah, so I don't really know what it is.
Bannon.
I think in most licensing, your kids aren't allowed in pubs after 7 o'clock anyway.
I don't know.
You might need to check.
What happened, Nico, in 2015? So the landlord of the Kenton Arms says everything has got much worse since 2015, and he doesn't know why.
Was that 52% of them?
It's Brexit, isn't it? It's flipping Brexit. He doesn't say that, but anything that has got worse since 2015, 2016, almost certainly down to Brexit. And why wouldn't it? If the adults can't control themselves, if they're allowed to lie and cheat and make stuff up, then why should anybody look after control? It's a bit weak, even for me, that. I don't think I can blame this on Brexit, can I? If he'd said 2016, maybe, but no, even I'm not going to try and blame this one on Brexit. You can, though. 0345 6060 973.
James O'Brien on LBC.
It's 12:48. To ban or not to ban? And I think that the more I read into what other parents, not me, obviously, or other parents allow their children to do, the more I'm amazed more landlords don't ban children. How many pubs? I don't go to the pub as often as I used to do. I'm trying to think now. I can't hand on heart claim to have been particularly perturbed by the behaviour of children in pubs, but recently. But generally speaking, they don't really add to the gaiety of the occasion, do they? And it is parents who are letting them. And Nico makes an excellent point. It does seem to be a peculiarly British disease, this. I wonder why that is. I don't know if we've got time to get into it. It is 12:49 and Ian is in Brighton. Ian, what made you pick up the phone?
Ban. Definitely ban.
Ban them.
My kids are in their early and mid-teens, and we were in London some time back, where we used to live. And for my wife and I, who enjoy drink as much as the next, the pub it's an environment for adults. Yes. And when we had kids, we still enjoyed going to the pub, but we would have to suck it up and arrange childcare for the hours that we wanted to go to the pub. It's not a suitable environment. And I live in a village outside Brighton, actually, which I won't name. There are 4 pubs, and it would be very difficult for any of those publicans to make the decision to bar kids, I think. And it's the parents that are the issue. Recently, one of the parents wanted to go toe-to-toe with me in the bar. Their children, who were just being boisterous, just being kids, but they shouldn't have been in the bar at 8:30 on a Friday evening.
So hang on, you objected, did you? And then the dad wanted to chin you?
The kids were running around being kids, having fun. It's a fun environment.
Yeah.
And the parents were in almost a separate bar, if you like.
Yeah.
Completely oblivious to what was going on. And they're running around. And rather than speak to the children, look for where the parents were, spoke to the mums who were all flying into the Prosecco, power drinking. It was Friday, but they deserve their time off like everybody else.
Sure.
Asked them if they wouldn't mind just having their kids a bit closer to them. And one of the dads came steaming over, told me I was a narcissist, arrogant, child hater.
Which of those was the fairest comment, do you think, of the 3?
It was just... and these are fundamentally decent people.
Because if that was me, I'd have to concede the arrogant point, but I'd object to the narcissism, and I definitely don't hate children.
I am arrogant. Yeah,
there goes. Nothing wrong with that, mate.
But it's also in one of our other pubs, watching the Six Nations rugby, and a parent there pulled up somebody in our group because of his fruity language. Not majorly fruity, but fruity language.
Do you mind not swearing in front of my child? And you're like, I'm in a...
Exactly.
I'm in a blooming pub, mate.
We need to relax as well, and that pub environment is for the grown-ups.
When did it change? Relax. When did it shift? Because you're right, you don't really think of it as a... When I was a child, it was almost unheard of to go into the pub with your mum or your dad, and you would sit in the car. You'd sit in the Morris Marina outside with a bottle of Dandelion and Burdock and a packet of KP Planters or KP Planters nuts. So when did it start changing? Do we think? Do we know? Or why did it? So is it the smoking ban? No, that wouldn't matter. We didn't care about that. Well, I'm with you on that, and I'm intrigued now by the idea of a small village that's still managing to support 4 pubs. You'd think one of them could go child-free. Might actually be a good business move. 12:52 is the time. Staying with hospitality, in a very, very what's that word? It's not tendential. What's that word that I want? It's like, is it tendentious? Tendentious. Is that a word, Keith? Well, it is now. Tendentious, a very tendentious way. We're staying with hospitality in a very tendentious way because my guest on Full Disclosure this week is Eric Schlosser, an absolute legend, I've got to tell you. It's a weird interview, this, as well, because I'd seen that new film, not new, I'd watched the old film by the guy that made the new film. Don't worry, we're nearly at the finish line now. My brain has gone. Paul Thomas Anderson, who made the Leonardo DiCaprio film that won all the Oscars, he also did that Daniel Day-Lewis film about oil. What's it called? Anybody? There Will Be Blood. And I was watching it the night before I interviewed Eric Schlosser, who wrote Fast Food Nation. He's a brilliant investigative writer, a brilliant writer. Fast Food Nation is a seminal masterpiece, 25-year anniversary. That's why he was in town. And I'm watching the credits at the end of There Will Be Blood. First time I've seen it. It was on Throwback Sundays at the local Everyman Cinema. And Eric Schlosser's name comes up at the end as a producer, and I thought it must be a different Eric Schlosser because he writes about, big fast food, junk food and inequality, and it was him. Same bloke. First thing I said in the end. Anyway, have a listen to this because, did I mean tangential? No, I meant tendentious. I think I meant tendentious. I'm going to look it up while you listen to this little clip of me talking to Eric Schlosser. Because if I tell you it's about the realities behind fast food, and it is. I mean, some of the things you discover is the amount of fecal matter that is in the average beef burger and stuff like that. But it's much, much more than that. And I hope this clip conveys what that is.
You know, if you look at the history of the United States, we had all kinds of major social problems, and they hadn't been completely solved. But by the 1960s and 1970s, you know, we had a very strong middle class. The extremes of wealth that you had seen in the 1890s had been reversed. So we still had wealthy people, but they paid taxes, and we had a very strong middle class. And it's really since around 1980 that you've had this extraordinary growing wealth inequality. You can look at the minimum wage. The minimum wage in real value reached its peak in 1968 in the United States. In today's dollars, about $15 an hour. The minimum wage, federal minimum wage in the United States today is $7.25 an hour. That means that the poorest workers have seen a pay cut of, you know, more than 50%. And meanwhile, we have people like Elon Musk and his group having hundreds of billions of dollars. And all of that comes from the sorts of changes in society that this book was trying to expose.
Well,
you know?
It did expose, it described, and it warned. How much energy do you expend on mourning the fact that the warning wasn't heeded? And I know we began by you observing quite rightly that you couldn't have expected to have changed the world. But when you think about that quarter of a century and that fetishization of free market philosophy that you're describing, the idea that the company can do whatever it wants if it's going to increase profits, and that was at odds with what happened.
And the great irony of that free market propaganda is the same companies and politicians who are promoting the free market are allowing one company to take over another and another. I mean,
they want monopoly.
You know, they want monopoly power, and you know, companies buy their competitors because they don't want to compete. And you can just look at one sector after another in the American and sadly in the UK economy that's being taken over by a handful of corporations. So one thing I want to make clear to people who may be listening is so much of what I've written about has gotten worse in the last 25 years. But it has not left me in despair. And it has not left me with a sense of futility, because none of this was inevitable. And when something's not inevitable, it means it doesn't have to be the way it is.
It's 12:56 and you are listening to James O'Brien on LBC. That's Full Disclosure from this week with Eric Schlosser, the author of Fast Food Nation. But it's an extraordinary book. It does the kind of journalism that I would never have been able to do. He went undercover in the meatpacking district in New York. He's literally working on... do you remember I got a bit obsessed about a month ago with the fact that you can't mechanise cow slaughter because of their size. They're significantly different. No, Eleanor's asking whether or not the reason why I couldn't go undercover in the meatpacking district in New York is because I'd be worried about being recognised. No, Eleanor, it's because I'm not physically capable of lugging a dead cow over my shoulder and then chopping it. I'm too squeamish and I'm too weak. Is that what you wanted me to say? I'm too squeamish and I'm too weak. Thank you. Wayne in Wayne in Basildon, is it? Why are you here?
I'm here to give you some insightful views on my evolution when it comes to this particular subject.
What, slaughtering cows?
Well, no.
Children in pubs?
Children in pubs and dogs in pubs as well.
Well, I'll give you 12 seconds.
All right, no worries. All right, kids in pubs is fine.
Right.
If they're happy to be there with you. If they do not want to be there with you, they're going to play up. There's no amount of tablets or colouring or anything that they will appease them if they want your attention. So if your kids want your attention, do not take them to pubs. All right? If they don't want your attention, they're happy to play on them particular devices and whatnot.
I like it. That's nice. It's quite wise, actually.
Yeah.
And
weird,
dogs.
isn't it? I'm getting old, aren't I?
You are getting old. Are we getting together next month? Did you see Gary's message last night?
Yes, I did.
Are we doing that or not?
100%.
All right, I'll see you then. It's been too long. I got to go. Sheila's getting itchy. Antsy. Speaking of words that I've misused, I was looking for tenuous, not tendentious. Tendentious is a word you'll be delighted to hear. But the word I was actually looking for was tenuous. It's a tenuous link to move from hospitality to the Eric Schlosser book, Fast Food Nation. So I highly recommend that interview, full disclosure. You can get it from the Global Player. And I also highly recommend the book, Fast Food Nation by Eric Schlosser. Why are you giggling?
I'm thinking, I was listening earlier when you were trying to find that T word, and I came up with the wrong one too.
What did you come up with?
I came up with tangential.
That might have worked better than tendentious.
It would have, but
yes.
but it's not the one you wanted. And I did wonder if you were having a bit of a
moment.
Menopausal meltdown.
Well, not a menopausal meltdown as such, but I certainly...
it was coming close to the day I said, good afternoon, welcome to Superdrug.
Yes, it was coming close to that. I could feel my brain just unspooling slightly as we reached the end. It's been a long week.
It's been a week, yeah.
I didn't read out Ant's message. Shall I read it out now? Is it good? Do you like it? We haven't really got time. The phrase we use to describe parents like this is that they're residents of Tarquinistan. Oh no, leave the rabbit alone. Tarquin is such a much maligned name, but residents of Tarquinistan. If you missed any of this, you can listen back on the Global Player or the LBC app, or you can watch it on YouTube as well. A range of podcasts, including James O'Brien Daily, the best bits from my show every day, and of course, Full Disclosure. Download the app for free from your app store now. Tom Swarbrick will be with you at 4, but now it's time for Sheila Fogarty.
You remember my name?
I was just checking. Superdrug.
Yeah.
Superdrug's very own.
Superdrug's very own. Sheila Fogarty.
James O'Brien on LBC.